feel like our attention spans have shortened significantly because of social media.
I use social media too much. Like, I know it's too much.
Just even walking around campus, students are always on their phone.
It's like The Walking Dead. Zombies looking at their phone.
Now, if you look up and you have to make eye contact with somebody, you're like, and then you go right back down to your phone to like avoid the awkwardness. So
last week I was on Snapchat 23 hours and 47. 23 hours? I was only on it for 8 hours.
All generations are using it now, whereas in the past it wasn't necessarily like this. So it's kind of become the town square for information. It's where you go to talk to your friends. It's where you can get news. It's where you learn. So it's kind of just important to know how it functions and how to use it because everybody's using it now.
I go home and my dad, my 60-year-old dad, is on TikTok. I like get DMs, Instagram DMs from my mom. It's just 30 videos of cats, just because I mentioned once that I might want to get a cat.
I'm definitely in the minority of social media use, I would say. I get a lot of like information and updates on scheduling and where events are going to happen from Instagram. I feel like it's convenient.
It's a great distraction. I like to get away from like my studies and everything like that, so I'd say a good thing. But it can be very bad in the wrong circumstances, yeah.
mental health, body issues, I'm okay with that and I'm okay with myself, but I know that a lot of other people aren't, and I know social media plays a big part in how they look at themselves and perceive themselves.
I think it really depends on how you choose to use it. I mean, like if we didn't have it, I would have no idea what my friends back home are doing. I think it's growing.
Yeah, there's like a market full of like social
Yeah.
media influencers, and there's like social media marketing and promotions and social media managers. It's just growing into a business.
It's really cool for the functions of being able to reach a lot of people and share your life, but at the same time, it's not real, you know? So you need to stay a little bit grounded.
Instagram's definitely going to stay around. It's like Facebook. It's always going to be there.
Yeah, but I feel like we're going to turn to Facebook when we're old.
No, because like
You think we're gonna
on
be-
Insta.
You think we're going to be on Insta when like we're our mom's age?
Yeah.
Ew.
I mean, it's embarrassing to admit, but I can't go 30 minutes without consuming some sort of media. Constant hits of dopamine. This is the daily screen time. I thought it was 4, but it's daily average of 6.5 hours a day.
How does that make you feel?
Don't show my mom this.
Influencers, ideas, and uncertainty. How Gen Z lives social media. Please welcome your moderator, Kenneth Moten.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, everybody. I am Kenneth Moten, as the announcer just said there. It's good to see everyone in person. Again, I am Kenneth Moten. It's great to be back at my alma mater, the University of South Carolina. Can I get some applause for that? So, of course, we have an audience here in the auditorium of the Russell House Student Center, which I spent a lot of time when I was here, class of 2004. It looks a little different than when I was here 20 years ago. Plus, this event is being streamed worldwide on the internet. In the next 3 hours, we're going to learn a lot, y'all. The global audience, they know what y'all means, right? We're gonna learn so much. We're gonna have a great discussion here, a vigorous discussion, I've been told we're gonna have. And we're gonna talk about the power of social media in the lives of young people, Generation Z. So they got an elderly millennial to conduct this, because I have a ton of questions about what's changed since social media just entered all of our lives. We are working in partnership with the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, of course known as UNESCO. The forum has been put together by the University of South Carolina College of Information and Communications. Please help me welcome the Dean of the college, the esteemed Tom Reichert.
Good morning. I bring greetings from the faculty and staff and students in the College of Information and Communication here at the University of South Carolina. And I always like to say we're one of only 7 programs across the United States that have both journalism and communication as well as information science under the same umbrella. And I think that uniquely positions us to be able to understand how information flows through social media, as well as all the perks and the pitfalls that entails. And then when you consider that information and entertainment are the number one source for social media, through social media for young adults, it gets even more intriguing. So I'm excited to learn a lot more today. I just want to give some special thanks to one of our star alums. Many we have, but Kenneth Moten, thanks for being here today. I appreciate that. Our influencers and our experts that we're going to have here today, Randy Covington, his team, MP Strategy, and everybody in the college who've made this possible today. Also the provost, our provost Donna Arnett and Ed Roberts for their support, and our good friends and partners at UNESCO. So please pay attention. I guarantee you're going to learn something new. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean Reichert. So as you saw in that very creative video, and I'm very honest, right? Those students, they'll tell it like it is. That video which opened this forum, young people are leading their lives on social media. To learn more, we have assembled this panel here, our first of 3 this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you are in the world watching, to talk about social media. We got to take it right to the young people. So we're going to start right here in South Carolina, even though we will be discussing many things with people from all over the world. Hey, panel. Hello. How you guys feeling?
Great.
Good. Welcome. He was stuck in traffic, everyone. We'll get to that in a second. But I want to start with Jocelyn Sanders, a senior majoring in mass communications. She has her own YouTube channel, and it has 52,000 subscribers. How'd you do that?
Post consistently.
So how do you use social media?
So it's kind of interesting because I use social media as both as a consumer, but also as a producer. I create content on YouTube and on Instagram, and I create all types of videos, just kind of showing my lifestyle.
Nice. And next we have Avni Bildakar, a sophomore public relations major. So Avni, I understand that you work with a student-run magazine, Garnet and Black, which I get all the time at home. I appreciate it. If you've never read Garnet and Black, make sure you subscribe and get it. So tell us about social media in your life.
Well, I use social media just like everyone else does, but I also manage social media for companies in my hometown. I just post for them regularly, consistently, every week, 3 times a week, actually. And it's so fun because I get to help out small businesses in my area. And then it's just so easy to be like not on the content producer side of it, but like the more manager side. It's very fun. I love seeing it.
Fun. And I assume that you guys, I'm thinking about your ages, you've only known social media. I knew dial-up. You don't know dial-up, correct?
No.
Right. So we know that social media is indeed integral to the life of today's college student, and Sorority Rush is a good example. There's an entire category of videos on TikTok called Rush Talk. Here at the University of South Carolina, a Rush Talk video by sorority here has been viewed 11.6 million times. Let's take a look.
Black Beatles in the city, be back immediately to confiscate the money.
That one, 11.6 million views there. And to get all of those folks, those young people to stay still, I'm sure the parents were like, how did you get them to stay still for so long? Morgan McCullough is a USC Honors College student and a vice president of the Panhellenic Association. So Morgan, explain the relationship between social media and sororities, the importance of it, and Greek life as well.
Absolutely. So it's actually really interesting. Prior to serving in my Panhellenic position as Vice President of Recruitment, I was actually my own chapter's Vice President of Marketing. And coming into the role, I had no idea that TikTok would be as prominent as it was. And I kid you not, my advisor told me that we needed to produce 4 TikToks a day during recruitment to keep up with the flow of interest from potential new members. So it's definitely, TikTok especially has really taken off within even just the last year for promoting your chapter and getting that PNM interest.
Nice. And Henry Wilhelm brings a younger perspective to this conversation. Henry is a 10th grader at Christ School, a private school for boys in Asheville, North Carolina. So Henry, welcome to the panel. Good to see you. How you doing this morning?
I'm good.
Good. So what does social media mean to you, and especially for high school students these days?
Well, I basically just use social media like every other person. I use it for news and I use it for communication, and yeah.
You know, high school students, don't worry, I'll pull a little bit more out of you. What are you and your friends talking about when it comes to social? And, you know, I think about, again, elderly millennial. When I was in high school, there were no smartphones. So are you guys always in your phones? Do you see positives, negatives? What's your take?
So there's definitely a lot of phone usage at my school. You know, like you'll go to lunch and you'll see kids just sitting on their phone and they won't communicate. And I think a lot of people have lost their ability to communicate because of the phones and social media.
Well said. Well said. And let's look elsewhere in the world to see if things are different. Moose Wang is a student at a university in Taiwan. Hey, Moose, can you hear me?
Oh, can you hear me?
Hey, we can hear you, Moose. And
okay, hi, I'm Moose.
Hi, Moose. Good to see you. You're coming from Taiwan. You're coming from Taiwan, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So tell us about social media there in your country. How do you use it, and how do you use it effectively?
Okay. In Taiwan, we use maybe Facebook and Instagram to search for news or in communication and connect with our friends. Maybe just like that. Yeah.
That's a good way to use it. Next on this panel right here, overseas, internationally, Christine Magoma joins us from Nairobi, Kenya, where she has worked with the Africa Center for People, Institutions, and Society. Christine, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for joining us. Talk about social media for you, what you're seeing there in Kenya.
Okay, great. From a professional perspective, since you have introduced me as a representative of the Africa Center for People, Institutions, and Society, I am the communications lead here, and we use social media to promote peace. Particularly, we did that especially last year in Kenya, because that was an electioneering year. And we tend to see a lot of misinformation on social media platforms, a lot of misinformation and malinformation. To sum it up, information disorder, especially among the youth. And those people who are spreading this information do spread harmful content. So our role is to come in and ensure that we combat this and provide the right kind of information, right tools to enable young people, particularly, to combat and protect themselves, as well as verify information. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. And I appreciate your perspective as well, because we do know social media has a lot of ways that it could be operated, and for many across the globe, it could be a life or death situation in the information that you put out. Let's bring into this conversation Andreea Stenzia, a PhD student pursuing a degree in sociology and political science in Bucharest, Romania. Andreea, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Talk about social media there, because there are oftentimes we are, I guess, in our own worlds, depending on the country, and curious about social media and the impacts there.
In Romania, it's now a movement in which we are trying to learn how to identify fake news, and we are trying to develop skills in order to be able to identify which news on social media are reliable and which are not. So I think from a, academic perspective, this is the main goal of social media in Romania. But from the perspective of users, most of us are using social media to communicate, of course, like everybody else. But there are also groups, depending of course on socio-demographic characteristics, that, for example, use social media to engage with the community in the sense what movies their community watch, what books they should read, and stuff like that.
And Eden Wagari is pursuing her master's degree at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar. She's a native of Ethiopia. Eden, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Please, I would love to know there in Ethiopia, even as a journalist, I've covered stories there and war-torn part of Ethiopia. Does social media play a role? Can people even get social media? Because I've heard of governments shutting it down.
That's a really good question. People really do use social media, but back home in Ethiopia, they usually use Facebook to get news. But in the past, we've seen Facebook was used by users to to create polarization when it comes to political issues. So despite its importance in providing news and information to users, it has also been used as a weapon to create two sides within the political sphere, and it had major consequences. There are definitely internet outages, but that usually happens during a peak of conflict, which is not as much, but it is there. But I know a lot of my family and friends have and are still using social media, like all types, like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok is still available. And there are a lot of creators there, as well as a lot of people who are watching and using social media on a daily basis.
And Dr. Estrella Luna Munoz joins us from Lisbon. She works with young people in Portugal, Spain, and in Latin America. Doctor, good to see you as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Please tell us about your work.
Well, I'm expert, I'm trainer, researcher, and project manager of media and information literacy. I've been working with young people in several parts of the world, and more of them is in vulnerable communities. So for us, it's really important to see, like, each time we can see that young people have technology access, but they cannot use, or they don't know how to use in a conscious way.
And I'm curious let's bring it back here, stateside, here in South Carolina, where you have this panel of young students at the University of South Carolina, and you hear what, internationally, what's happening with social media and how it's being used. For anyone on this panel, what are the differences you see, and is there anything you could learn about what they just spoke about? Anyone?
Yeah, I would love to. Mm-hmm. I think there's definitely a prominence in the rise of people in Gen Z seeking social media for their news sources. And that can contribute in a lot of different ways, like they were mentioning with misinformation and disinformation. I think that that's something that our generation, more so than others, has to tackle and really be conscious of the media that we're intaking, and make sure that you're getting it from a reliable source. So that's more so now than ever with all of the different sources out there and the rise of social media. Anybody can make content now, so really have to be conscious of what you're taking in and what you're believing.
Jocelyn, what responsibility do we have on social media?
I think anyone who uses social media has a responsibility to have integrity with all of their posts. They have to be honest, especially if they're reporting information. And if they're doing something, even like just creating content, you have to be mindful. Like on TikTok, for example, there are a lot of different like suicides and kind of harmful challenges that were very bad for young kids because they don't know any better. So I think it's very important that you're responsible, because a lot of kids are very impressionable and they don't know any better.
Eden Wagari, let's go back internationally. I'm curious for you. You hear our panel here in South Carolina of young students. What differences do you see when it comes to how social media is used in the U.S. versus in other countries?
I technically don't see as much difference personally, because like here as well, like where I've been in Qatar for like 4 years now, and like going to 5, people use social media to get their information like the same way it is in the US. So maybe the platform that they use might be different. So like at least I know for back home in Ethiopia, like people use like Facebook and WhatsApp to get their information, which can cause a little bit of credibility when it comes to gaining information, like gaining accurate information. But I still see social media as being the platform and the tool to get news. So if we compare it for past years, it has definitely evolved. So people used to use, television and radio, but now they still use the platform. So that's where I see the similarity, but the difference might be on which platform are people prominently using to gain news and information.
And Christine, there in Kenya, let me ask you, how effective is social media, not only in Kenya, but across Africa?
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'd say social media is very effective in demanding and ensuring that young people particularly are listened to, be it from a government perspective, young people trying to get the government's attention, young people trying to promote their products, market products, because social media platforms can be used from diverse perspectives. We have the business aspect, we have advocacy aspect. So it is very effective. The only challenge I would say is now translating that noise, quote unquote, on social media into policy. Then that becomes a challenge because people will bring out issues. People will consume information, both good and bad, because there are very good aspects to social media platforms, as well as the disinformation bit, which is not good. And then they will demand change. They will demand some level of impact, some level of accountability across African countries. We have an example of Kenya. We also have an example in Nigeria, whereby we had the EndSARS, and people managed to use social media to bring an end to, or at least have police brutality. So across Africa, social media is effective. However, how does this noise, quote unquote, how does this advocacy used on social media then translate into actual policy, into being implemented in the laws and ensure long-term change? Yes, thank you. That's what I have.
Of course, it was great. Moose Wang, student at National Chengchi University in Taiwan. Moose, we hear a lot about One China policy, a lot of politics between the US, China, and Taiwan. How is social media used in that discussion, that debate, and when we're talking about that One China policy?
I think we talk about One China policy is always, there's lots of misinformation and disinformation. Like last year is our election, and social media do affect our angle to see the world, and that's different to anyone. Like my parents and I, we use social media. They're the same platform like Facebook. But we saw different contents and different news and different angles. So if we get news from the social media, and I think that will really affect our angle to see the world. Yeah.
Andrea, there in Romania, I want to go to you because I know there in Romania, you spoke about the importance of social media and what you're seeing there. Obviously you heard from our young people here in South Carolina, the younger generation there. Are people always on their phones? What platform are they using the most?
Well, I think now the top platforms used by young people are Instagram and still Facebook. We don't use that much Twitter, but I see a lot of increase in TikTok. Either I don't have an account on TikTok. I hear a lot of friends and, for example, my brother's friends who are purely from Gen Z, they are using TikTok and they spend a lot of time by watching short videos. Some of them, they say they are quite useful because they teach skills like what to do when someone choke. But there are also like stupid videos that you watch just to don't do something productive and kill time.
The ones that keep me from going to bed on time, watching those videos. For our University of South Carolina panel, Henry, TikTok, do you use it? Use it a lot?
Yes, I would say I use it too much.
So I spent 20 years in TV news as a journalist, and it was my job to get important stories on the air. And I will say over the past 20 years that has changed about how news operates, how we get out those stories. TikTok, who gets their news from TikTok? I see some hands here in the auditorium in South Carolina, and then everyone here. What all do you get from TikTok? You get restaurant recommendations, how to do things, what else? Avni?
Okay. I will say I have a weird relationship with TikTok because my For You page will recommend me the stupidest videos, and then I will have the urge to delete the app. But when I do re-download it again, eventually, it is really interesting to see like the amount of people who will get their news from TikTok, like life-changing news about like restaurants, apps, countries, stuff like that. They'll actually only use TikTok as the platform to get their news because it's short, it's easy to access for the most part.
So you're all getting news from TikTok. Did you see the news that there's an effort to ban TikTok?
Yes.
Does TikTok talk about that?
A little bit.
A little bit. And do you think it will ever happen?
Not in this
Jocelyn?
country. Not in this country.
Why?
I think we have a good democracy, and I don't see that happening. I don't see like the citizens going for that. But I also wanted to add on to what she was saying. Basically, like I get like everyday news from TikTok, so like you said, recipes and stuff like that. But also like when it's major events, you can get that from TikTok. And what I like about TikTok is it allows for people to have different like perspectives. So with the Astroworld tragedy, for example, there are firsthand accounts from people there, and they could give you a better insight into what happened instead of listening to the news. Because the people on the news, they weren't there until after the fact. So that's what I really like about TikTok and platforms like that.
So Morgan, the reporting that the reason that the U.S. government wants to ban, and even local governments, state governments want to ban TikTok on, state, local government phones is because they believe China's listening. Do you listen to that? Or when you read that headline, do you think anything of it when you watch TikTok, you go on TikTok?
I would say personally, I don't really believe that. I think one of the great things about TikTok is it's giving a lot of people a voice and a platform to talk about topics that may not get normal attention. And, you saw with the one TikTok that you showed earlier, that got 11 million views, and it's just people standing around a room. So it's kind of unpredictable what will go viral and what will catch people's attention on the platform. And I think that's why people view it as almost dangerous and that somebody's listening in on us. But I think that the speech and the platform that it gives people that typically wouldn't have that voice outweighs that risk, in my mind at least.
Henry, I'm asking for this global audience, not for me. Is Instagram old now? Should I not be using it?
No, I do not think it's old.
You say you do not?
Do not.
Why?
I don't know. I just think it's what my generation uses, and I don't think there's really a substitute. My generation doesn't really use Facebook very much or Twitter. It's pretty much all Instagram.
Okay, there you have it. I'm old. Dr. Munoz, let me go to you because you hear these young people. You work with young people again. You're in Lisbon, and you work with young people in Portugal, Spain, Latin America. What did you think about what you just heard from this panel here at the University of South Carolina?
That's true. Every year, everything changes. It's like 1 year is one online platform, and the other is changing. So it is a new one. We can see that in before and after COVID pandemic, we saw how TikTok was famous. So just 3 months, and then everybody was connected through TikTok. So nowadays, the difference between the real world and the digital world is not existent. So we are connected all the time, even in communities or even in some vulnerable communities. At least we have a cell phone. So this is a weapon of communication, and also we can use it in a better way. But I think that we need to guide young people how to use it in a different way. They know the challenge, the dangers, but maybe don't stop to use it, but use it in a different way.
That weapon of communication, doctor, that you mentioned, does that mean that there are the positives outweigh the negatives?
I think it's equal. It's like I don't want to say it's positive or negative. You can use it for both, but I believe that you can use it for positive things, and it's a beautiful weapon. I could say weapon, but it's a beautiful weapon to connect with everyone, and we can see now we are all together here. We're from different parts of the world, and we are sharing all these challenge, all this new technology, and this new different way to connect with each other. So I believe that will be more positive than negative.
And Avni, do you trust social media? I know it's a very broad question because I'm curious if there's a video you see and you're like, oh, that's funny, that's hilarious, that definitely happened. Or do you start to question things that you see?
I definitely do start to question things I see, because I, like, from the perspective of a social media manager, and then also from your perspective as a social media content producer, it's very easy to edit and skew the way people will view content. And I don't trust social media all the way, especially for everyday, I don't know, I guess everyday funny content, because everything can be staged, because it's just a camera and you can control it.
So I'm sorry, please finish.
You continue. Go ahead.
Jocelyn, I'm just so curious, fascinating discussion. I'm curious that as the older generations say, social media, again, there's all these negatives, you see these positives, you can't imagine a life without it, I'm sure.
Actually, I can, because when I was younger, my mom didn't allow me to have social media, and I can say back then I had way better mental health. My self-esteem was better, so I actually can imagine a life without social media. And the difference now with having it, yes, it does foster connection and community, but there are also some bad things, like she was saying, and because it is so oversaturated, people do anything to stand out, and that includes lying and doing clickbait.
So you're saying you had a strong foundation, you knew who you were.
Until social media.
And so great, because I'm glad you said that, because that moves into the next part of the discussion I want to talk about, which is we're going to later on speak with influencers and talk about the role of influencers on social media. But for this group of young people, I'm curious about how influencers play a role in your life. Do you pay attention, Henry, to influencers? And do you have a favorite influencer?
I don't really. I look at more sports news and that kind of stuff. So I don't really pay attention to the people who just put their lives on Instagram.
Morgan?
I would say I somewhat pay more attention. I can't think of a particular influencer who is my absolute favorite at the moment. I know a lot of people in my demographic are watching Alex Earl. She's the most recent one that's blown up. I think that her content is nice just because it is more casual and just talking about her life. But I think in general, influencers don't play a super predominant role in my life.
Avni?
I will say that I have seen influencers are great and all, and I do appreciate the work that they do. But I have seen a lot of them do this new trend of de-influencing, which is this crazy concept of just telling you don't need to buy all these things that they're telling you to buy. And I think that's really cool. I think that's really thoughtful. And I would much rather have someone de-influence me than influence me into buying things that I do not need.
I didn't see it going there. I didn't know about anyone in this audience knew about de-influencers at all. So yeah, again, we're learning something. Okay. Jocelyn, have you seen de-influencers?
Yeah, I've seen that. It'll be like things not to buy on TikTok, especially. And I think it's like a really good concept because we live in a capitalist society, and especially on social media, they're constantly trying to get you to buy things. So that just kind of reminds you like, hey, you're content with what you have. You don't have to buy the latest trend because there's going to be a new one tomorrow.
Have you, anyone on this panel, seen Fake Famous about influencers in that world? For those who may have seen it, may have not seen it, it is about influencers and the lives they live and the lifestyle they want to portray. And the question is it real? When you see it, do you think some people are actually being real and authentic? Or most are not?
I think at a certain level, social media can be a really great way to be authentic. But I do think when you rise to a certain level of popularity and have that much attention on you, and it does become your living, I think that's when a lot of people tend to, I guess, curate their content more so to appeal to what their fans want and also the image that they wish to convey. And especially if they get into management and have different people kind of observing them and the content that they're making, I think it's very easy very quickly to get away from the authentic content that you started with.
Internationally, Moose Wang, they're in Taiwan. Do you pay attention to influencers?
Not particularly, but I do. I follow some influencer like maybe outfit or sports and many kind of this influencer. But when I saw this influencer when they post and every day and showing their lifestyle, one question is that I would think that way, like, are they really doing great every day and they don't feel unhappy or depressed every day? So, but that's my question about that. So when I use any social media and I watch these influencers and watch their fancy life, and yeah, they're cool, and I think their life is maybe looks better than me, but I do have that question about that. Yeah.
Christine, in Kenya as well, let me ask you about influencers and the role they play. Are they prominent there in Kenya?
Kindly come again, Matthew. I believe I was having some internet connectivity troubles.
All good. That is the virtual world that we're in today. I just want to make sure you were unmuted. You were. I wanted to ask you about the role of influencers in Africa and in Kenya. Do you see an impact there?
Okay, great. So for that, I will answer both from a professional perspective and for Christine Magoma as an individual and not a representative of the organization that I work with. Let me begin from the perspective of the organization, ASEPIS. I do believe that influencers do play a critical role in reaching out to the masses, particularly those that disseminate true and credible information. And people follow them, they have a huge crowd, then they come in handy in reaching out to other people, especially when we're conducting virtual capacity building and trainings. Then we get to reach out to very many people and ensure that the change and the impact that we desire to create is then realized. We can reference that to the Social Media for Peace trainings that we conducted in partnership with UNESCO at ASEPIS. Then that was influencers came in handy in retweeting messages, in ensuring that we trend. Then that is great. But now from a personal perspective, I believe that influencers are both, there is a pro and con to it, whereby, as the lady said, sometimes you tend to look at someone on digital platforms, which I see a lot among the youth in my age and Gen Z basically, and you want to compare lives, yet what you had asked earlier is whether we think that what they post is real or not. I think that majority of people do not post their bad days as much as they post their good days. Then when younger people tend to, when they view this information, they end up comparing their lives to a really tiny percentage of one person's life, and that then leads to mental health issues. However, there are other influencers, this both locally, regionally, and internationally, who really play a critical role in just bringing information to people. I'd reference to two people. One is myself, Christine Magoma. I do have a YouTube platform called Authentic by Magoma. And what I do is bring information to people by having conversations with different people. I also enjoy watching videos from an international, I'd say, influencer. His name is Lewis House. I do hope I did not butcher his name. I think that the conversations that he has on his platform with different people do open up your mind and bring a lot to you and to your table to ensure that you lead a desired lifestyle that is real and realistic. So that's my perspective. There's a professional perspective, and then there is the individual perspective.
Great points there, and it reminds me that I've been using this general term of influencers, but there are different types. There are lifestyle, medical, political, activists, all types of influencers there, and it's all about who you want to watch there on social media. Our PhD student Andrea Stancia, you heard there from Christine those great points she made about influencers and the role they play. I'm curious about your thoughts as well on influencers.
I think as my younger students says to me, influencers are the new jobs that exist in the job market. One of the new jobs. So yeah, probably it's a new area that will stay with us for a couple of years from now. And of course, there are positive and negative aspects of following an influencer. I think for someone that has critical thinking and has a personal opinion about the things that follow on internet, influencer can pinpoint some the most important aspects that exist in the society at that moment in time. But if you are young and you don't have your opinion already formed and you cannot put your critical skills on play, it can be a danger in the sense that we create a public opinion that maybe at some point can be used as an, instrument. For example, if you want to influence the elections, or if you want to influence the market products and so on.
Andrea, you mentioned something I wanted to talk about, which is social media and influencers being a job now. Dean, is that a major now here at the university to be an influencer, or is it a major?
So we have a social media degree and we have classes on it.
So social media degree and classes on influencers. That's what we're seeing now in educational institutions here in the States, and I'm sure across the globe. Let me ask Eden, is there a influencer category that you respect more than the other?
That's a really good question. Personally, it is a personal choice based on my interests. And the ones that I usually found genuine and really have a positive impact in my life is food influencers. So people who do, mukbangs or food reviews. I feel like those type of influencers are the least problematic because they don't, for example, they don't enforce any, unrealistic expectations on how your body should look or anything. They're just having this human experience of, tasting food and reviewing it and share it with their friends and family. So I really like those. So I feel like that's what I would prefer. But when it comes to lifestyle vlogs or, YouTubers, I usually go for people who look like me and who are similar to my situation. So whether they're student YouTubers, like people of color like me, so I usually tend to go for them. And I completely agree also with what Andrea said. Like I was able to have these critical thinking to choose these type of influencers. But I understand for the younger people, like younger than I am, it will be harder, and it can have a long-term impact on, the standard of beauty and how they view themselves. So for me, those are the two ones that I prefer.
Dr. Munoz, I know that you, as you work with young people in Spain, Latin America, Portugal, the role of influencers, is there one thing that surprised you about what you've learned about the influencer young people relation?
Today now, but before, like 3-4 years ago, it was shocking, because one of the activities that we did was like we wanted to ask to children, like, what do they want to be when they grow up? And they always say, like, I want to be a YouTuber. The answer was not like, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a policeman. They want to be a YouTuber. And nowadays, the young people want to be like influencers. Like, it's a way to live. And it's a way to contact with everybody, and I can win money. So today is not shocking anymore.
Not shocking. Does anyone here at our South Carolina panel, anyone want to dive into that world professionally? No?
Me, obviously.
I thought it was just for fun, a little, while you're in school.
No, I gotta make the coin.
And is the financial aspect of it, the money, is that the when you think about a priority professionally, yeah, we think about money, but how that money, lets you live in your life and your well-being. So do you think about that and the money that you can make on social media?
Yeah, I think with social media, it's kind of challenging because that job is just so personal. Like, you're literally putting your life on a platform. And so when your videos fail like that, you're going to take that more personal. And because your mental health is so impacted by it, I think that it is a different profession in that way. And with social media, I think there are different ways to earn incomes, and you have to be aware that it's so inconsistent. You might not get views on a video, but they have different ways to make money, like with sponsorships or with promoting things. That's how you can kind of supplement your income.
Nice. And as we wrap up this first hour here, I want to give Avni the final word of this South Carolina panel about not only what you learned, but what's your message to those internationally as well, since we've had this global discussion when it comes to social media.
That is a lot of pressure, but I will say, as someone who's been using social media a long time, both aspects of like social media marketing and just as a regular user, I use social media however you want, follow whoever you want. It really doesn't matter. Be conscious of what you buy. Don't get influenced too much. Yeah, I don't know, just keep being who you want to be.
I love it. Keep being who you want to be. That's a good final word, right? Big thanks to not only our South Carolina panel here. Can we please give them some applause here in the auditorium? And to our international panel. I know that you're in many time zones, and I was trying to do the math about who was where and what time it is. I can't do it, so if it's in the middle of the night, good night, good afternoon, good morning, all of it. Thank you so much for your insights and your perspective. It's good to see you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So there is so much more to learn. We are listening to the younger generation. I sound old when I say we're listening to the younger generation. I'm still young. Our forum is just getting started, everyone. We're going to take a short break to prepare for our next panel. When we return, we will meet some influencers and content creators, and we'll talk to those who study and write about them. Our forum will resume at the top of the hour. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Influencers, Ideas, and Uncertainty, How Gen Z Lives Social Media. Again, I'm Kenneth Moten. Good to see you. Round of applause for this auditorium here. And our global audience. Now we're going to meet some of the people who are shaping social media, as well as some of the people who are shaping our understanding of social media. First, we will hear from Sarah. Sarah, say your last name for me. Shower.
Yes.
I
Like take
it.
a shower.
I got it. That's a good one. According to our University of South Carolina, she's got a fun USC story since she lives in California. I'll let her tell that later. But according to USC's Social Media Insights Lab, 2 million people followed Sarah on TikTok. As it turns out, even though she is still in her 20s, Sarah is an old hand at this. She was one of the top content creators on Vine, a short video platform that preceded TikTok. Here's one of Sarah's recent posts.
Yeah, they pulled video.
Right here.
Can I tell you guys something funny? I made this shirt as a joke. Not all lesbians hate men, but I do. And you've probably heard this joke before. I just thought it'd be funny on a t-shirt. And I got a bunch of Instagram DMs from a bunch of dudes who were like, wow, this makes me want to unfollow. Fellas, can I tell you something? When Vine died, I lost 850,000 followers. And then when I came out as bi, I lost 15% of my male audience. And then when I came out as a lesbian, I lost over 20% of my male audience. You fellas keep leaving, and this is the most successful I've ever been in my entire life. So if this shirt makes you want to unfollow, please do, because it means I'll make more money.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah Shower.
Yeah, that was actually the most random one I could have thought of. I was so scared of what you were going to show. But I guess that's the only one where I don't curse, so that was probably appropriate.
Yes, and I love you, and you didn't lose me.
Okay.
Yeah, you didn't lose me. So Sarah, what's your target audience, and do you have a target audience?
The gays, ages like when you realize you're gay to like about 35.
Okay.
Mostly women. When I was on Vine, it was a lot of men, and then when I came out as a lesbian, like for some reason, like men that you see this in like your normal everyday life of where like a girl will have like a lot of followers and then she gets a boyfriend and loses followers. The same thing applies to like influencers, is that these men follow you because in their mind they're like, we're gonna date. And so when I came out as a lesbian, they're like, all right, pack it up, guys. So it's about 80% girls between the ages of 18 and 35.
Were you upset about those dudes leaving?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. Jenna Palick is another successful influencer. The Insights Lab says she has almost 600,000 followers on TikTok. Her popular posts are based on the belief that weekdays should be just as fun as the weekend. Take a look.
So I just applied for a job at TikTok and I saw that there were over 2,000 applicants, so I was feeling a little bit discouraged. And then I thought, what better way to show that I'm the perfect candidate than for my TikTok to go viral? Here's the TikTok theme resume that I made for my application. Fun, right? I applied for the account planner position in Austin, Texas, and now I'm going to tell you why I'm the perfect candidate for the position. Not only do I have a passion for TikTok, but I also have extensive history in sales. I've been working for University Tees for over 3 years, and I've generated over $250,000. Most recently, I ran a giveaway that reached almost 15,000 people and generated over $35,000 in sales. I've spent the last 2 summers working at Sherry Hill. I've worked with hundreds of different bios at 4 apparel markets, and even helped at New York Fashion Week. I was a sales intern at Love Shack Fancy in New York City for 4 months. I was a campus ambassador for Bumble and learned how to increase engagement on the app, and was on student government at Kent State. TikTok, do your thing.
Jenna, I'm following you here. Tell us, how much fun are you having, and how can we join you?
Well, thank you so much for asking. At the time, I'm telling you, like, it was more normal to do dances like that. And the fun, right, was a reference to like a viral bartender at the time. But it's funny watching that video back because I just didn't realize like the ways that video in my college house. Actually, it's so funny because I'm wearing the sweatshirt from my college house. I was in Alpha Phi, so we called our house Fever. And I posted that video like a couple weeks before I graduated college. And then things just kind of like changed. I don't know. I worked at TikTok corporate for a year. And then amidst that, I was kind of hit with reality of starting your first job, which is kind of overwhelming. And you go from being in college where everyone is surrounded by like your own age and you're all in the same stage of life, to then graduating, moving somewhere new, or like maybe not moving somewhere new, but then being surrounded by people who are in all different stages, it was just really difficult to acclimate. And so my way of acclimating and figuring out who I was fun on weekdays. And then I started a podcast, and a year after working at TikTok, I was very fortunate to be able to leave my job there and pursue it full time. So having lots of fun on weekdays now.
Fun. And we're going to have some fun here talking more with you in just a bit. Let's bring in Olivia Carville, covers technology for Bloomberg. Olivia, good to see you. Olivia has written about the problems associated with social media, including children posting sexually suggestive content and online challenges that sometimes lead to death. Olivia, as you report on young people living their lives on social media, what do you see?
Well, first off, hello everyone, and it's great to be here. I do feel like I'm kind of the downer after those two and how exciting their lives are and what they're doing. So yeah, I do. I focus on the intersection of online safety for children and the digital world that we're all living in now. I think that we don't actually know long-term what the consequences are going to be on children who grow up in this digital world and right from the get-go are either consuming content from cell phones or on screens. My 2-year-old niece knows how to find a song that she likes on Spotify. This is quite terrifying, and I don't know what her life is going to be like in 10 years or 15 years down the track. We're also seeing a real fetishization around the influencer world. So many people want to be influencers now. There was a recent survey conducted, and influencer was the second most sought after job, second only to doctor. So kids are growing up now and they're seeing these social media stars, and that's what they want to be. That's what they want to become. So what does that mean for society? And that's a question that I've been trying to answer. And I'm really interested in that intersection of the digital world we all live in and how do we keep kids safe online.
We can't wait to discuss that more with you as well. I want to bring in Dr. Brooke Duffy, an associate professor at Cornell University. She studies and writes about gender and sexuality for publications like The Atlantic, Wired, and Vox. Brooke, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So as you study these issues, I assume there's a lot of complexity that you're tackling there.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to be here. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of the complexities because like Olivia said, there's kind of a fetishization of the influencer industry and a lot of glamorization of it. And so the research I've been doing over, I'd say the past decade, as we moved from sort of the fashion blogger realm to influencers and now the kind of sprawling creator economy, has sought to draw attention to the work and labor that goes into these careers in terms of the focus on promoting yourself, but also thinking about the realities of dealing with the precarity in the current platform environment, like knowing that at any moment, TikTok could go down or whatever platform you rely upon could go down. And you're also kind of thinking about the whims of the algorithms. And so I am kind of excited to hear how the influencers in this panel reconcile with these various forms of visibility.
Great points there. And again, thank you for joining us. And back here on stage, Sarah, did you think you were the youngest person on this panel? Are you usually the youngest person on these types of panels?
How old do you think I am?
I think you're 21.
I'm 28.
Oh.
You gasped?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, but our youngest influencer is Aksa Masrat. She is only 10 years old, and she already has 60,000 followers on Facebook, where she posts about the beauty of her home state and draws attention to its problems. Earlier this week, I had a chance to speak with Aksa, who was at her home in Kashmir. What surprised you when you started posting?
I was very surprised after seeing the unexpected response that I got from the public. So the motivation that people gave me, my first video when I was just 6 years old back in 2018 January, I created my first video about a topic which I was not actually familiar with. So I created it about Chilekalan, which is the harshest 40-day spell in winter. I did not know a lot about it. In fact, I did not know it was actually something that existed. So I just got to know about it from my grandparents. Then I thought to myself that I should create a video about it so that children of my age can relate it to the real life situation. So after uploading that video, I got an unexpected response, and that was so surprising. I felt really good.
So what's something you learned about yourself in creating those videos?
I have learned a lot through these videos. Creating these videos was a great learning for me. I have learned that the joint effort of like every single person in the society can actually help bring a change in the society. It can help to actually develop the society in good sense. I have learned that if you want to do something, if you want to bring a change in the society, you should start from yourself, because you are the one who is actually going to bring a change in the society.
And speaking of suggestions, what advice would you give to other young people who want to do what you do?
My advice to other young people who actually want to create content is that if you are committed to something good, just carry on, come what may. If you are really committed, you're going to face a lot of hurdles, a lot of obstacles are going to come your way. But if you are committed to something good, if you are committed to it, nothing can stop you from doing what you want to. Nothing can stop you from achieving your goal.
There you go. Round of applause for that 10-year-old there, Aksa Masrat in India. We pre-recorded that interview because big time difference, and 10 years old. Can you believe that? I mean, I'm like thinking about what I was doing at 10. It wasn't giving words of inspiration there. Just incredible. Our next guest is someone we know well here at the University of South Carolina. Dr. Jabari Evans is on the faculty here at the university. He is interested in how urban youth understand their local environments and identity. Jabari has a book coming out on hip-hop civics. Before joining academia, Jabari was a hip-hop songwriter and producer himself, performing as Knowledge. Jabari is joining us virtually also, since he's a visiting professor this semester at Harvard. Jabari, it's good to see you. Wish you were here. We understand Harvard was calling. So what do you see when you look at social media?
I mean, to piggyback off of Brooke, all social media fame isn't created equal. And so kind of where I enter into the conversation is I think about how certain identities, when constructed, can become commodified or even fetishized on the internet, right? And so my work very specifically looks at how Black youth, who are very much power users of the internet, power users of social media, are seeking to become powerful users of social media. And so that's sort of how my work has sort of entered into this conversation. And you've given my background on being involved in hip hop and this community of practice. And I found that there's a hip hop mindset. There's young people that are in the hip hop community that are sort of similarly to how we've taken the turntable and taken auto-tune and taken other, technological innovations and made them our own. I think, when we look at something like Black Twitter, we look at how, Black dancers are on TikTok. We're seeing the same type of revolutions that hip hop has always spawned. And so I sort of enter in the conversation in that way. But yeah, it's changed exponentially. What we could do to get visibility just 6 months ago has changed. And so I think the pandemic in particular has shown us some really interesting ways to not look at this as a perilous time, but a promising time.
Amen. And we will talk about Black and brown content creators in the space there and making even more space. Finally, we have V. Hey, V. Somebody bring in the desk. If you don't know, you're going to get that.
It's so weird out here, right? There's so much air.
She is known for under the desk news. Typically, I was trying to sit at a desk. She gets under it. They are described as TikTok's #1 newscaster with 2.8 million followers. Take a look.
Monday night, and here's what's happened.
B, what are you doing under my desk?
Well, under the desk is kind of my thing. I mean,
but here's the thing: you can stay for now, but when it comes time to voting, you're going to have to get up because you've got climate change legislation on the ballot, you've got gun safety, and if we can elect more pro-choice members of Congress, we can reinstitute Roe versus Wade as the law of the land. So you can't stay here. You're going to have to take a little bit of time to vote.
It's now a bad time to say that I voted for McCain in 2008.
As long as you voted.
Okay. Go to iwillvote.com and I will see you at the polls.
Wow. Yeah.
There is nothing more embarrassing than watching your own content.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's good content.
Well,
Am I
speak for
right? Like, when they
yourself.
played your videos, were you like, oh my God?
Yes, I will say after 20 years of TV news, after the first year, and then after that, I just like looking at myself. No, I'm just kidding. Not. So V, you've assembled quite the following. Big applause here in the auditorium because you just had a former president sitting under a desk. And people say, how? How did you do that?
Oh, I was just as surprised as anyone because they told me it was unbecoming of a president to sit on the floor, let alone lay under the desk. But former President Obama was like, well, this is what you do. And the kids like this? I was like, yeah, they love this. And he was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it then. And I was like, oh. But I want to actually address something, the idea of like influencer and why we're here, right? And being introduced as an influencer. A lot of people are horrified by that. They're like, the number 2 job that people want to have is influencer, and like how concerning that is for the kids, and like how desperate that is for the future, and how bleak is that. What is an influencer at the heart of it though, right? It's an entrepreneur. Influencer is something that women are typically doing the most. And it's gotten this kind of negative rap because women are finding this path to being their own boss, to putting their opinions out in a way that is not being knocked down by either regular news media or by the patriarchy. They just have this direct channel to other people to talk to them and to be their own boss and to make their own money. And I think if we start looking at what is an entrepreneur and why do kids want to be one, or what is an influencer and why do kids want to be one, it's because we haven't made other jobs look all that fun lately. Like, when I was growing up, what did you want to be? I want to be a nurse. My mother was a nurse. You want to be a nurse now? Does that look like a great job to you? When you're hearing about staffing issues, my brother wanted to be a police officer. You want to be a cop now? That's a hard job and they're not getting paid enough. You want to be an influencer? You get to talk about what you love. You get to build a brand. You get to own your own time. You get to enrich yourself and build a platform for yourself. That sounds great. We never make fun of people who say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a business owner. But it's very easy to look down on somebody who is an influencer. And so I want to kind of like set that tone before we get into it, because I think that's something that we don't hear a lot and we don't get the respect for a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Great point. And that's why I want to ask Sarah, do you listen to the critics or do you just ignore it?
Critics in what way? Like haters or people who are critique influencing?
Yeah, when the haters say you have a job, why don't you go get a real job? To that you say?
I just paid $240,000 in quarterly taxes. I have a real job. I would say to the haters, I've been online since Vine, so it doesn't matter anymore. And also I've been to therapy. I feel like you can discern between someone who's telling you to kill yourself is they're hurt people, but so that doesn't really matter. Their words mean nothing. It'd have to be a totally unique insult for it to make me pause, but it's not even that I would take it in and be they hurt my feelings. One time someone told me I had the vacant stare of a mule, and I was so when it comes to the haters, I listen to that just because it's so unique. But when it comes to hating,
they're creative.
Yeah. When it comes to hating on influencers, I get it. I live in LA, everyone's an influencer, but I think it's just what was the question? I have ADHD.
Do you listen to them? Do you listen to the critics? Do you learn anything from the critics? And you use that power to create something?
No, I don't think the people that affect me the most are not even the public when it comes to influencing critiques. It's traditional media. So social media and traditional media have this East versus West sort of thing where in traditional media, they hate if anyone is from social media, and that can seriously harm you when getting into stand-up comedy or music or acting. It's almost it's a negative thing. So that's the more hate that I'm concerned about, because I want to get into stand-up. And I've tried to, I have a stand-up show coming, but at the Laugh Factory, to actually become a stand-up comedian, you have to work the door and you have to be a bartender first before you get stage time, because that's how they do it in traditional media. And so they hate that there are people building their portfolios and resumes online as a way to cheat the system and get crowds quicker.
Yeah. Also, Sarah was expecting a shorter commute to this forum.
I got an email. Well, I got a text from my manager that said, "Do you want to speak at USC?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to speak at USC." And then he's like, "Let's get you a hotel and a flight." And I was like, "It's 40 minutes down the road." And then he was like, "South Carolina." And I was like, "You know what? I'm from South Carolina, so I would love to speak at USC."
It's good to have you home. Good to have you home. Jenna, you heard our panelists here on the stage. How do you fight back at that criticism?
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting for me because speaking of people celebrating me getting a corporate job versus me sharing that I was leaving the corporate job, there's a complete difference in the support that I received. And so people were like so happy for me. They were encouraging me. They were so supportive when I got this job at TikTok, this corporate job. I'm falling into this standard traditional, like hourly job that everyone has to work and it's just for a cool company. But then a year later, when I share that I have other opportunities that allow me to pursue what I'm actually passionate about, what I feel as though I am more suited to do, and I feel as though are like pushing me more. There was definitely a lot of criticism from that. Not only people saying, I don't know how she can afford to leave her job. There's no way that she's making that much money from social media. A lot of people saying that she doesn't have enough followers in order to leave. She's not even an influencer. She's just going to be like everyone else. And then a lot of people also that were saying, I liked you better when you had a corporate job. You were more relatable. And to that, it's like it really discouraging because it put people into this box where like you cannot grow outside of this traditional thing that they want you to be in. And then once you do, it's like you kind of lose this sense of who you are. But I think that was my issue, is that I attached a lot of my personality to my job. And so when I left that job, people are like, well, now what are you going to do? And now I'm like, well, my job is to literally do social media, which I was doing before. And you were so happy for me to do before. But now that I'm doing it full time and I'm not struggling and I'm not like trying to balance every single aspect of my life, now you want to criticize it. So to an extent, I feel very motivated after you two have spoken on the stage. I feel like I have a better, I guess like perspective towards how to treat that type of criticism. But for the past year, I've only been doing this full time for a year now. And that criticism has like hit me really, really hard, to be honest. It's like definitely affected my mental health. There's still people that are rude about it. And it's hard to not get down on yourself for sure. And a lot of me is like, would it just be easier to go back to a normal job so people can stop giving me, this, I can't swear, but, stop giving me criticism for it. And so it's definitely difficult coming from my perspective, but mainly because I built my following on this job to begin with.
Yeah, we hear you, and we knew where you were going there. And Dr. Brooke Duffy, you heard Jenna there. I want to talk a little bit more about what you focus on, but when you hear Jenna and talk about that criticism, how it impacts, this is a job. She is not out robbing banks. She's out making an honest living. And we'll talk more about authenticity and honesty later on. But when you hear her words, I'm curious about your thoughts.
Two thoughts. I wanted to come to Jenna's point, but also I really appreciated V's comment about the tendency to dismiss influencers as a career. There's this kind of widespread sense that it's like frivolous or it's fluffy or it's just like a 16-year-old posting content online. And it is incredibly laborious and time intensive. And so I think V's point about the kind of feminization of it, it's seen as kind of women's work in a historic sense is really important. And yeah, I was really struck by Jenna discussing the vulnerabilities of this, because I think that's one of the elements of this career that gets omitted in kind of the popular imagination. You're putting yourself out there, which demands visibility, but that also entails considerable vulnerabilities. And there's this kind of like normalization of it, like, oh, you put yourself out there, so you open yourself up to hate and harassment. That argument would not fly in any other job context, which this is. And so I think a lot of the responsibility falls on what we would think of as the employers, which is platform companies, to better protect influencers and creators from the sorts of incivility and hate and harassment that circulate, especially for people of color, especially for women, especially for marginalized communities whose jobs require them to be visible in a kind of personal and professional context, but without the recourse that like a traditional workplace would have, where you can go and say, like, I'm being harassed. This is identity-based harassment. What can you do for me? The platform companies just kind of put the onus on creators to deal with it themselves.
And last hour, we spoke about having a strong foundation before getting on social media. But we know, especially from hearing from Jenna, from others, it can be very tough when you're getting a barrage of negative comments that are coming your way. And so, Olivia, I ask you this about children being on social media, and how far is too far, and what's the greater discussion here about young under 18 down to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatever being on social media?
I think it's a great question, and one that we as society haven't really come up with an answer to. But I do want to just circle back to Brooke's comment and earlier to V's comment, which I think is a great one. I'm a journalist here. I do write for a mainstream publication. I'm not here to defend the media. Journalists are inherently cynical and we often view industries through a negative lens, right? I get that. But I think when it comes to the influencer culture, there's a lot of misunderstanding and misconception around what the influencer industry really is. And that is scary. It's scary to media. It's scary to journalists. It's scary to Wall Street. It's scary to corporations. And when you look at how much money is coming in for the influencer economy right now, I think last year, this industry was worth $14 billion. This is big money we're talking about. So what is the long-term impact, and what kind of protections are in place for those influencers? Obviously, the individuals we have on the panel today are incredibly good at what they do and are really successful and have found that niche to get a lot of followers and get a lot of attention. But there are so many kids out there who are desperate to get to that point who never will reach that level of success on the platforms. So how do we protect those who want to reach that level of fame but don't know how to get there, or look at other content and feel as though it looks easy to them, but don't understand the amount of labor that goes into it, that you have to post on a daily basis, how much effort it takes to come up with creative ideas. Beyond that, there's no job security here. You're beholden to these big corporations that can change their algorithm on a switch of a dime. And these companies, not only are influencers making them a lot of money, but these are for-profit corporations, and their incentives don't always align with safety or for what's best for the influencer themselves. And I think that is a question that we haven't quite figured out yet. So, and to circle back to what you actually asked me, Matthew, I feel like we as society need to understand, and we need to draw lines in the sand over responsibility. What do the corporations have to do here to protect not only kids who use their platforms, but the influencer economy and those who are the most successful at it as well? What do we as, society, our lawmakers, our educators, what should we be doing? And what role do parents have as well? I think that the issue of parental exploitation or parents encouraging kids to get into this career is a really fascinating one. And I've spent quite a lot of time with parents who are really eager for their kids to become influencers, but may not understand what that really means because there's so much misunderstanding around the industry as a whole. It's a lot, it's very mysterious to a lot of people. And that's why I think this panel is so important, and hearing from both those who may be viewed as critics of the industry, but also those who are really successful in the industry themselves, kind of talking about this and what's the right way to move forward.
And V is the reason for some of what we're seeing with people not understanding and how fast social media has grown, because it feels in many ways it's still in its infancy. When I was here at the University of South Carolina, there was no social media. There was Facebook that started, but you had to have the EDU, and then a few years later, we all could join. But
let me tell you a fun story about my first job out of college. Are you ready? I think this is going to help put it in perspective. I worked at Dollywood. Do y'all know Dollywood?
Yes.
All right. So I was in Smoky Mountain Christmas, and I was a singer, and it was my first professional job, and I was so excited I couldn't stand myself. And they brought me down from New York City, fresh off of my degree in musical theater, and they were like, you're gonna be in this show, and you're gonna live in this trailer, and you're gonna live with all the rest of the entertainers at Dollywood. And I was like, this is a dream. I am so excited to live in a trailer in Pigeon Forge. And I just thought it was the greatest. And all these, if you've been to Dollywood, then you know that she has a lot of different kind of like circus performers also. And there was this group called the Mapapas, and they were from Kenya. And we were best pals. And so they would teach us like circus tricks, and we would teach them like guitar, and then we would do all these different things together, and we had our little performer economy. And I remember asking one of them, I was like, how did you get this job? And they're like, well, the man comes, and your only way out of Kenya is to do cirque performing or to play a sport. And they test us. And so from when we're little, we're really sort of like, our parents are saying like, okay, well, you're more athletic, so we're gonna try to push you to sport, or you're not athletic, or you're more gymnastic, so we're gonna push you to art and music, because when the man comes, this is how our family, I'm gonna cry, gets out of this situation. And that is what is happening with parent influencers. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry here at the University of South Carolina. If we made the real world a less exploitive place, we wouldn't be looking to influencers or sports or the circus to get us out of this situation. And I think that's kind of like the heart of it, right? It's not that everybody wants to be an influencer, it's that they see that as a possible path. They don't see a path out of poverty or out of the middle class by just following the normal trajectory and going to school and then getting a job, and then you're supposed to be okay and you're supposed to have security. We see tech layoffs like crazy. We see companies not taking care of their people. We see cuts to healthcare. We see the government, even if you got a good government job, do you get a pension anymore? Are they taking care of you? So I think it's been the same that it's always been. It's just this is the newest industry to kind of be the big face of it. But if we made the real world a little bit easier and a little bit kinder, then we wouldn't have these people so desperately trying anything they could to escape it, even if that is at the risk of their children, who they're going to train to be athletes, who they're going to train to be circus performers, who they're going to train to be influencers. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I will say, amazing, and again, great points, and thank you for allowing me to have this Barbara Walters moment. May she rest in peace. I got her to shed a tear, and you know, I mentioned Barbara Walters because when she passed away. Recently, there was a clip that was played over and over again where she was interviewing the Kardashians. And she said, you don't dance, you don't sing. What do you do? What talents do you have? And these are influencers. And I think that goes back to what you were saying here on the stage about traditional media and how they see social media and influencers. Do you think, as you hear about people getting news on TikTok, that there's space for everyone to play, or that because traditional media, coming from it, there are some who believe social media is killing traditional media, but do you believe there's space for everyone?
I do. I think it's kind of traditional media people are trying to like gatekeep, you know, like you have to go through everything that everyone else went through. You have to be a PA and then work your way up. It's the same with anyone who's been in like design school. Like you get your portfolio out there by putting it online. And so our portfolio is TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. And that's how we get noticed. I have so many friends who are in movies because they put their or they've created TV shows just because they put their stuff out on TikTok. That got them a meeting with the right person, and then now they can pitch their series to, you know, UTA and like agencies, and it's actually there. And I feel like, sorry, ADHD.
Yeah, you're on a roll.
Yeah,
and just about there being room for everyone.
Yeah, there is room for everyone. I think, you know, if you have your niche, and there's a clear divide between like, I feel like a lot of people are focusing on like when they think of influencer, they think visual influencer, like model and stuff. That is definitely oversaturated the beauty world. But when it comes to personality influencing, there's so much more that could be done when it comes to comedy and politics and science and education. So I do think that there's a space for everyone.
Dr. Jabari Evans, let's go back to you there in Harvard again. Still here at the faculty of the University of South Carolina. Still want to give you that shout out. Tell us when it comes to hip hop, social media, social justice, all of that. I mean, I just feel like there's so much there, and especially in the wake of George Floyd, racial reckoning, how we've seen corporate, you know, America appearing to change. I'm curious about your thoughts on all of that.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, before I get to that, I do want to bring one point. We're in a participatory culture, and technology is not going to slow down. And I like to put it like this: we're not, and I think you probably are familiar with this as well. 3-channel fame is not a thing anymore, right? And we're in a space where no one is waiting for 15 minutes of fame. People are just trying to be important to the 15 people who post and comment on their content every day. And so that's where we are. But in terms of how this has provided pathways for Black voices to be heard and to speak out against injustice, I think that's one of the case studies that I like to highlight, where I say that's the promising aspect of social media. Social media has given voices for those in the LGBTQ community, those who are, in the African-American community, as well as those who are coming from third world countries, the ability to level the playing field and have their narratives shared and their experiences shared. And I think so we have to get in the crux of understanding that political movements and social movements are also starting through this. And so there's a difference between just having visibility and trying to have a sustained celebrity from the things that you post. We have to delineate between that. And I think where there's been some issue about authenticity, it's whether someone is, say, putting hashtag Black Lives Matter or putting a black square on their feed just to show support or be an ally, or whether they're doing it to chase clout. And I think that's sort of where hip hop comes in, because hip hop has always been like really quick to call people out for being fake and not being real. And that's something that's been at the crux of that culture. And I think that spawned internet culture and hip hop culture, I think has spawned many trends. And as they've sort of mutated and formed this baby, we see cottages online where conversations are happening. Again, I point to like Black Twitter spawning, Black Lives Matter, spawning Me Too, spawning Say Her Name, spawning Girls Like Us, spawning all of these different, I even think about, the University of Michigan. They had their Black While at the University of Michigan campaign, where, students at a predominantly white institution were sharing their experience of what it is to be a minority in a university setting. And the fact that we're in a participatory culture, it doesn't mean that the folks at the top just get to talk to the people at the bottom. Now we have instantaneous feedback, and you also have to take into account what's going on. So, if Sarah's posting something on TikTok and it's meaningful, that means you can have to report about it, right? And so I think we need to look at it in a more positive lens of saying that there's more experiences, narratives, and discourse, and it just makes things more nuanced.
I will agree. And before I ask you that next question, a point you mentioned about traditional media. I was in TV news. I was a national correspondent for a major network for 8 years. And I will say for the morning program for that network, if we did anything involving someone on TikTok, we had to mention how many followers, because it was always a big number. How many followers they had on Facebook or likes or whatever, this many views on TikTok. And so it's interesting how traditional media even uses what's happening there with influencers and on social media. But Dr. Jabari, let me ask you this. When you hear about how we think of social media as there being a space for everyone, you making your own space. And so for Black and brown content creators, for LGBTQ+, for all those folks out there who feel marginalized and are marginalized, here on, and what we would say real life, even though social media is real life as well, for Black and brown content creators, is it fair? Is it a fair space to play in? Are they being treated properly, appropriately?
Short answer is no. Right. There was actually a documentary that came out not that long ago by the New York Times called Who Gets to Be an Influencer? And I think you could see very clearly that there are Black and brown folks who have, 500,000 followers to 1 million followers, are posting things that trend, yet they're unable to find brands to sponsor them. They're unable to find the monetization pathways to make this actually be sustainable. They're still living at home with their parents. They're still struggling to not be shadow banned. And I've had folks even tell me that, they have to pretend to be from other neighborhoods, or, they have to pretend to be different genders, or they have to pretend in their profile, or they have to try to manipulate this black box that is the algorithm in order to be rendered legible. So I guess that lends me to think about this idea of what is the price of visibility? Particularly in hip hop, surveillance is something that comes with visibility, where young folks who are from marginalized communities, low-income communities, violent communities, when they're just living their everyday life and seemingly just expressing themselves, often their experiences are rendered less valuable. So their metrics may not matter as much as some of those who are even on this stage right now. And so that's something we need to get over and get past. And so, no, it's not necessarily a level playing field.
The algorithm, people talk about it not enough, I guess, because are you taking the executives at TikTok to task about that? Not you, even though, no, you, because you're under the desk journalist. So should they be taking the task for the algorithm and how it promotes videos and puts videos into people's phones?
I mean, the biggest concern about the algorithm is how quickly of a pipeline to the alt-right there is. I don't know that we could talk about the algorithm changes where one month I'll be hitting my normal numbers and then they'll change the algorithm and it'll go down for a little while, but it'll come back up. But I think what's most dangerous when we talk about an algorithm is what content is reaching people and how quickly. And that is something that I think is going to be a way bigger issue that somebody else needs to deal with in terms of where's the line between free speech and where's the line between promoting democracy, and then where do we stop harm, and why don't we stop harm? So we can talk about how your view count may be affected by algorithm changes, but I think we should actually be talking about why something like Libs of TikTok has such incredible algorithmic potential on a platform like Twitter, which is actively manipulating and pushing harm content. So I think there's two sides of algorithm. One side is sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, but the people who ride or die for you are always going to come find you. And that's why the number of followers you have, I agree. Traditional news media is how many followers do you have? Because they're thinking of how many viewers do we get for this show, and is that the same? I get 1.5 million views a day. The Today Show almost lost their mind. They were like, how? And I'm because it's different. It's not the same as you guys, right? It's it's an algorithm and it's a view count, but it's different than a full hour-long, 3-hour-long show. But I think with algorithm, what we need to be concerned with is what is being pushed to people and how we control that a little bit.
So that takes me to Olivia, because we talk about young people, children, suggestive content of involving children, and that is showing up into the feeds of people across the globe. But we're also living in an age where the prevalence of social media, where you have parents now who don't mind putting their 5-year-old or 8-year-old, whatever, online. So how do we even tackle that? And how do we protect the children?
I mean, short answer is I don't actually know how we protect the children. These platforms legally aren't meant to have anyone under the age of 13 using the apps. And yet we're seeing time and time again that kids who are 6, 7, 8 years old are on the apps, and how easy it is to get around these age gates. I did report on a story recently looking at the dangerous online challenges that have been trending across TikTok and other social media platforms, and some of the worst things that have happened in those situations. So I was down in Wisconsin and I met a family whose 9-year-old daughter actually died attempting one of these dangerous online challenges. And we've seen dozens of kids around the world who have just been too young to understand the risk of online challenges, because you sign up for a platform like TikTok and it looks so fun and so cool, and you want to do what the bigger kids are doing, but you're 9 years old and you don't understand if by holding your breath or wrapping something around your neck that there actually comes an inherent risk to your own safety in doing that. And I think that is quite frightening. So what are these platforms doing to ensure that they are following their own rules? That's something that we as outsiders can't really change. This is how the corporations are themselves following their own policies, which say you have to be over the age of 13 to use this app, but yet they know that millions of kids who are under that age are using them on a daily basis. And that also lends to, the point that you were just raising around what are effectively kind of pageant mums. And V raised a good point about how social media can pull you out of the social strata that you maybe grew up in. You view it as a pathway to fame and to breaking out and to making money down the path, and you don't see another option. You feel like, social media may be that option for you. So you can become famous. You don't have to look a certain way or live in a certain location maybe. And historically, we've seen pageant mums or people who wanted their kids to become famous at a young age have had to move to places like LA and Hollywood. Now you can kind of do it from anywhere. And this means that a lot of parents are encouraging their kids or even posting about their kids at the age of an infant, a baby, viewing content of them changing diapers or having a temper tantrum on the floor, and they're using that content to become social media famous or to grow their own following. But what are the kids going to think, 10 years down the track when they look back at that content and say, Mum or Dad, like, why did you post about my diaper change when I was 2? Like, is that fair? Is there a level of privacy that these kids deserve that maybe parents aren't thinking about? And we haven't even delved into the issue of predators using these apps to try and track down kids, or the issue that V raised before about filter bubbles. I mean, there are filter bubbles pushing us in different political directions and the concern of leaning people towards the alt-right. There are also filter bubbles around eating disorders, around depressing content, around suicide or self-harm. There are so many issues that I just don't think we fully understand what the long-term consequences or impacts are going to be.
And I know that people are still studying that and will continue to as well. In our final minute here, I just want to go back to our stage and to Sarah and V, because I'm curious at your final words about authenticity and your final message.
I think I call TikTok the community theater of social media, because we want to see people like us. Like, it's like when you go to a community theater production, you don't want to see Kim Kardashian. You want to see the mayor of your town play Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar. Like, you want to see somebody get their moment. And I think that that's a great part of it. And I think, you have folks, I get messages from kids in Northwest Arkansas who have never seen a gay person in their life in some cases. And they're like, I get to spend time with you. I get to find other people who are like me. I get to feel less alone. And I think that's really important. I think when it comes to TikTok news and kids people getting their news from TikTok, it is always coming back to traditional journalism, right? I'm reading an article that Brooke put out on gender studies, and I'm saying, oh my God, I read this awesome thing from Cornell. Let me tell you about it. We are advancing each other's good work. And I think that's why legacy journalism and what's happening with TikTok news needs to be a little bit more friendly with each other, so that we don't pretend like we didn't read this in the New York Times and it's our original idea. We need to be giving credit to these journalists and these organizations who can have the money to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. I don't have that kind of money, but I need that to be able to tell people a story. And I think if we can bring people together a little bit more friendly around that, we'll have an overall better experience.
And Sarah, my fellow South Carolinian,
can you rephrase the...
What's your final inspirational words to this global audience?
On authenticity. Mm-hmm. I think, I think influencers that stay a long time, like I've been online for like 10 years, are deeply flawed, and that's why you like them. I mean, that's why you pick up a book. Like, you don't want to read the first page of a book and it's like Kim Kardashian never had a problem in her life. You want to read 300 pages of that? Like, and that's why with more visual influencers, they cycle in and out so quickly. But I found I've stayed online, for me personally, like 10 years is because I've been authentic, and like I'm sharing exactly who I am. Like, I've recently talked about how I joined AA, which is counterintuitive to AA to tell everyone that I'm in AA. But like, people like finding that out about me, even though it's something I'm horribly ashamed of. It's like a lot of people and like my followers are like, you know what? I also struggle with like alcoholism, and they didn't realize that about me, but it's, I can incorporate that into my comedy and like what I talk about. And it's just like, I think authenticity is growing, and Jesus, I didn't wrap this up well. Also, I'm a drunk. Oh, sorry.
Former drunk.
Yeah. So I think it's you can be authentic and lovable and honest as long as you are being honest. And I think you can tell when people aren't honest versus when they are. And that's why people get an audience.
Amen. That's why I wanted to give her the last word. Thank you to this incredible panel here on the stage and virtually as well. Good to see you all. Thank you for that incredible, incredible discussion. We're learning so much more, and there's a lot more to come. In our next session, we will zero in on social media and social change. We'll be right back at the top of the hour. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Again, I'm Kenneth Moten, just in case you didn't know. Social media content fills many different roles. It can inform us, entertain us, educate us. It can divide us. It can also bring us all together. In our third and final session of Influencers, Ideas, and Uncertainty, we will zero in on how social media can facilitate change. Our first panelist is Leah Thomas, who is better known as Green Girl Leah. The Insights Lab here at the University of South Carolina has found she has 237,000 followers on Instagram for a feed that focuses on social justice and environmentalism.
Hi, everybody. California is having historic rain. And yes, we need rain, but not this much. And the kids on TikTok are wondering, we live in California. Why is this happening? Spoiler alert, it's the climate crisis. I am so sorry, but it is the climate crisis. And these rainfall patterns are historic and unusual, and they're causing some major issues from flooding to potential mudslides. So let's get into it. This rainfall is so unusual that the Bay Area is having the second wettest day since the gold rush. So these are historic conditions. And to put it simply, just like underwatering a plant is bad, so is overwatering a plant. And California is being severely overwatered right now. Even though we're a drought-prone state, we don't need this much water because it's leading to flooding, the destruction of trees. And speaking of our tree friends, unfortunately, because of climate-exacerbated wildfires, we lost a lot of trees, which really disrupted and destroyed and destabilized a lot of our soils. So these floods, plus the soil conditions, unfortunately, and the loss of trees is the perfect combination for mudslides. So this is not just a series of really not so great rainy days. This is the climate crisis. And if we don't act quickly on climate, unfortunately, this is going to be a reality.
Leah, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So let me ask you this. What do you mean by intersectional environmentalism?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. So when I talk about intersectional environmentalism, I'm referencing intersectional theory created by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, and really just, and its original intentions was kind of the study of overlapping identity aspects. And when she created it, she was kind of exploring how her Blackness kind of intersect with her womanhood and some legal outcomes that might happen because of those two things. So when I'm talking about intersectionality in the terms of environmentalism, it's really important to also consider identity and who's the most impacted by the climate crisis and environmental injustice, especially because race and income are the number one and number two indicators of who's going to experience the most environmental injustice. So it's really important to pay attention to those things to ensure that environmental policy is comprehensive enough to make sure that the folks who are the least responsible for the climate crisis are not being the most impacted by the climate crisis. So that's what I mean by intersectional environmentalism, exploring identity, culture, and environmental outcomes.
You got some applause here in the auditorium, just in case you couldn't hear it. I'm sure you're getting it globally as well, because amen on that. The New York Times described our next guest as U.S. Senator John Fetterman's TikTok whisperer. Annie Wu Henry oversaw Fetterman's TikTok account, which gained 240,000 followers. I'm just trying to process that. It's a lot. That's a big number. And it was done in 3 months. You're proud of that, I know. Here's a video about Fetterman's opponent, Dr. Oz, not being able to count the number of houses he owns.
What comes after 2? 3. What comes after 3? 5.
Oh my God. That cracked me up. Annie is special to us here at the University of South Carolina School of Journalism because she was once a student here. So Annie, the New York Times says, your motto is embrace the cringe. What do you mean by that? Because I didn't cringe on that video. I was just laughing.
Well, that is a quote from Taylor Allison Swift. No, that video is fun because it was like one of the first TikToks, and it was the first like really weird one. And I remember making it in my apartment, and you can see that I like hadn't cleaned my laptop screen because there's like some mark, and I was like filming of the laptop. But I remember like giving a disclaimer when I sent it through of like, so it's kind of weird. Like I need you to just give it a chance. I think it's weird, but it works. But I think that was what we talked a lot. You guys talked a lot about on the last panel with authenticity, and you know, John's TikTok account, when we launched it, we knew we weren't going to be having him do dances and do some of the things that app was used for, as well as we wanted to convey messages, but we wanted it to be in a way that was a lot of what we talk about is the algorithm and, you know, echo chambers on social media and wanting to reach people, but not necessarily the people that he already know about who John Fetterman, the candidate, was, because those are the people that already have looked him up and are doing their research. We were trying to reach people in a different way and meeting people where they were at, and that had to be entertaining and something that caught their attention and that they'd stay tuned for. And so that was doing something that, you know, you get the message across of how many houses Dr. Oz owned, but at the same time, it's something that you can send to your friends, you can laugh at in a way that still feels true to kind of the scrappy, very like kind of quirky and fun campaign that we were running. And so, yeah.
And no, the social media game was strong. I think that's an understatement for the Fetterman campaign and for that Democrat there in Pennsylvania. And so our next panelist looks at politics from a more conservative perspective. Shoshana Weissman is a digital director of the R Street Institute, a center-right think tank based in Washington, D.C. She writes frequently on political issues. Good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, first time in the University of South Carolina?
Yeah, and first time in South Carolina.
Okay,
so
well, welcome to our
me.
lovely state here. Shoshana, social media often is viewed as a hotbed for progressive views. Is there a place for those with different, more conservative opinions?
Yes, but I wish a lot of those with conservative opinions would actually have conservative opinions. That would be a good place to start. A lot of the ones who go viral on the right, I feel like, are just not spouting conservative views. It's a lot of big government. And I'm like, we were here for small government. And it's a lot of just saying crazy stuff for attention. And there's nothing wrong in moderation with joking around. But like when it's stuff that's just not reasonable, when it's stuff that's not good for America, I'm like, maybe we do less of that. But I have 60-something thousand Twitter followers, and my things are sloths. I love sloths. I'm actually an associate fellow at the Sloth Institute because I do what I want and people like roll with it. Regulatory reform. I don't think you should need an occupational license to be a florist. And that like is a really big thing for me. Licensing reform, making sure people can work across state lines, that if you're a doctor in one state, you can go to another state. And hiking, I'm a big hiker, and autoimmune diseases. I have lots of those, and I love talking about them because when I was a kid and I was going through the diagnosis process, that wasn't a thing. Like you weren't like, I have Crohn's, and now I can be like, I have endometriosis. Like this is fun. And if you're going through it, DM me and we can talk about it. But I'm a really weird brand. I lean right, but I work with everyone who's down to nerd with me. And like, I owe a lot of good things in my life to social media, my career, diagnoses where I Google stuff. And then I found the kind of doctor I needed to go to. And I found out I also had one of my many fibromyalgia. And I'm just so thankful for it. So all because of that, one of my other nerding things is tech policy, because I want to protect everyone's ability to have their voice online, to make sure that government isn't going to stop the ability of platforms to host this content, and make sure that like I'm not closing the door behind me. So I wear a little Section 230 necklace because I'm a dork, but I really like Section 230. I know everyone hates it, but I'm here for it. And there's people who disagree with me, and they should be able to talk, and I love that. So I think there's room for everyone, even sometimes when I wish there wasn't sometimes. Yeah. It's still good that there is. I want that free speech. I want people to be able to have competitive ideas. It's not always going to work out how I want it to, but sometimes it will, and that's great.
It's great to have you. As a news nerd, I love policy wonks as well. So I'm glad you're here. Good to see you. Yeah. Let's bring in Dr. Mark Owen Jones, an expert on how social media platforms are used to spread mis and disinformation. Jones is on the faculty of Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar. He is the author of a new book, Digital Authoritarianism in the Middle East, which demonstrates how social media can be weaponized in the Gulf region to support those types of regimes that repress. Mark, there's so much to unpack here. Tell us how those repressive regimes are using social media as a weapon. Are the people even able to use social media to fight back?
Hi, it's good to be here virtually. Thanks for the question. It's a big question, and I'll try and be concise. How do regimes use technology to repress people? Well, there's many different methods, right? And it's not just regimes in the Middle East or authoritarian regimes. We have to understand that the apparatus of repression extends across different countries. So, for example, just to give you an example of how this works, you might have an American firm like SCL Social, who works with Cambridge Analytica, who works with a British company based in Dubai. And their job is to create adversarial content, so negative content smearing particular people who are in the Middle East, right? So you have this kind of supply chain of different actors involved in, for example, spreading propaganda or disinformation for political purposes. But there's all sorts of other techniques, right? You can dox people. I've seen governments dox journalists and launch misogynistic smear campaigns using fake accounts, bots, to attack those people. And when I say bots, I mean thousands of automated accounts who spread misinformation and disinformation. They might, if they're very advanced, use bespoke spyware, which is technology that when it's installed on your phone, which they can do this without you having to click anything, that has access to all your phone's details, whether it's WhatsApp, it has access to your camera, has access to your microphone, and essentially they'll be spying on you and turn your phone into a private spyware device. This is one of the most obvious examples. But there's many others, even basic phishing, creating a fake account that befriends you or befriends your friends in order to try and get information about you that can be then used to assassinate your character. These are just some of the ways they can do it. Same, we've seen the spread of hate speech online. We saw in Myanmar, Facebook being used as a tool to spread hate speech against particular minority groups, the Rohingya Muslims. This then led or contributed to what was been called a genocide. So there's many ways that they can use it. And a lot of the platforms being used to spread this are either based in the US or, in the case of TikTok, China. So we all have a responsibility in looking at how these networks of disinformation supply chains, and authoritarian supply chains work.
Yeah. I think it's good to have you here on the panel. Our next panelist right here on the stage, Ross Mack, has been called the Wall Street Rapper. He uses TikTok to provide financial education to his 84,000 followers on TikTok. Ross sometimes does this through conversations with his beautiful infant daughter. Take a look.
All right, Rossi, we back. You want to learn something? Yeah. All right, so let's talk about stocks and bonds, right? What are the two different things, right? One, obviously, they're both two forms of investments. So let's talk about a stock first. There we go. So a stock is buying ownership in a company, right? So you buy a stock, you own a slice of a company. So right now, if you buy a stock, so if you buy a stock of Disney, right, you're now a very small part owner of the overall Disney brand, right, the company. Now, let's talk about bonds. Yeah, bonds is you effectively loaning money to someone. So either a company, a municipality, or government. So bonds are a much safer investment because at the end of the day, you're loaning them money. They're going to be paying you back interest in return. And guess what? They have to pay you back, right? You now have a more kind of securitized form of a payment because they got to pay you back before, they actually pay people that own the actual stock. But those are two different forms, stocks versus bonds. Good job, Rossi.
I think I lost her midway through.
Yeah, I'm sure she retained some of that. So you're using social media, TV as well, to educate financial literacy. We even had a discussion last night, which there was a whole discussion, y'all, with behind the scenes that we can't talk about. V, right? No, yeah, but we can't. But maybe we'll get it a little bit. We will. A little extra side. But is it working?
Yeah, so the way I look at social media, I look at it as an opportunity to I'm trying to help bridge the wealth gap, and I'm trying to bridge it through the information gap, the exposure gap. And so as I'm talking to my daughter, what I'm trying to help bring the audience in is maybe some of the things that they are less inclined to talk about because maybe they're embarrassed, right? If I think the average person, if they asked a relative what's their credit score, they might get a little defensive. However, if I post a video about how to improve their credit score, then that's something that they would potentially engage with. And so one of the things I really realize is that financial literacy is actually a language. The earlier you learn how to speak it, the highly likely you'll become fluent in it. And so it might seem kind of crazy that I'm talking to my daughter who's now 2, so she's actually a little more responsive now, but it might seem a little weird, but the reality is the more I continue to talk to her about investing and how to improve her credit score and retirement planning, that will all become second nature to her, right? If I only spoke Spanish in my household with my daughter, she'll be fluent by the time she's 4 or 5. The idea is to have her thinking about investing. I want her to have the conversations that I never had, so that's how I utilize social media.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Our final panelist here, Alexandra Kozaiva, is joining us from Kyiv. She's been living and working in a war zone. Alexandra is a marketing executive with United 24, which uses social media to tell Ukraine's story in English. Take a look.
One country between democracy and tyranny united the world.
Freedom has a name. Its name is Ukraine, and the Ukrainian flag is the flag of freedom today.
Around the idea of freedom. And what do they know about Ukraine?
Call it a museum of corruption, but
what have they seen? So maybe we can show Ukraine as we know it. A media showing real Ukraine to the world. United 24. No propaganda. No bullshit.
Is everyone in Ukraine that badass?
Not boring. To tell about real heroes and the price of freedom. To make people fall in love with Ukraine. How should we do it? Boldly. Honestly. Badass. As only we can. Join.
Alexandra, it's incredible and a special honor to have you here joining us because we know, again, as I mentioned, you are in a war zone. How are things going there? And I have to ask off the top, are you safe?
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone from Kyiv, Ukraine. Things depends, but it is one of the most impactful insights of last year that life continues, and it continues even in state of war, and actually people leading to the normal state of life, and that is why we are living, we are working, and we hope that everything will be fine eventually, and that is why we are working, yes, on such projects as United 24 Media, for example, because we understand that we need to show the real Ukraine. It is not the total war zone. We still have business. We still have a lot of people who developing cultural projects and so on. And that is why we communicated, and we wish to show like the real Ukraine, not that one that people may.
A little bit of a freeze there. We hope that Alexandra comes back again, coming to us from Ukraine, from a war zone, and we'll come back to her as soon as we establish that connection. Green Girl Leah, may I turn to you for a second, please? Because when we talk about, in our last hour, we talked about traditional media, journalists, and for you, I saw in that TikTok video we showed you were taking from other media sources. Is there information and research you do on your own as well as you put this information out, this critical information?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's a blackout now.
Oh wow. Okay. Gringo, pause for me for just a second.
Sometimes
And so you said you get those blackouts, I remember, kind of frequently, correct?
Yeah, and as we have the alarm right now, sometimes we have that blackouts unplanned because like our government shut down the electricity preventively, because when the rocket when the rocket bombs in the working electricity, it is worse than to reconnect it, and that is why, yes, sometimes it happens. I'm sorry for that.
No, do not apologize at all. And I know that it might seem strange to be asking you about social media and the impacts in Ukraine when you're in that situation, but I know it's important to you because of the impacts of social media during this war of Russian aggression. I want to give you the time there while we still have you. I know in the dark, but we can still see you, still beautiful, still great. We can still hear you and see you. Can you please tell us about the impacts of social media there and the importance of it in this war?
Yeah, of course. Social media in Ukraine became, not just the tool for getting information, because currently people are the newsmakers. And for example, as United 24 Media, we're not having so much own content. But what we do, we use user-generated content and just translate it and show to the people. So actually, it is like from people to people. So anyone, just as me, can make a video, yes, and we have messengers spread widely as Telegram, for example, or Viber. So people just share their videos right there. So that is more as communities. And then actually even TV and other media or digital media as we are use it and spread information. So each Ukrainian became a journalist right now, because you never know where the rocket will come or where something will happen. That is why it is very important. And the second thing, yes, about this community building, it is also about active participation, because in circumstances of war, yes, or of such any unplanned events, it is great when people can collaborate and when people can give useful information. So, for example, you know that Russia uses drones right now, yes, to bomb and rockets and so on. And we have special programs, so each person can make a photo, send it, and it will be sent right to the Ministry of Digital Transformation together with the Ministry of Defense Services, and it helps Ukrainian army actually to fight with these rockets and to make our cities safe. It is not always happen, of course, but in mostly cases, yes. So that is why now we neutralize like around 80% of bombs that come into us.
Wow, incredible. And we know that it plays a critical role in the fight there in Ukraine. And again, stay safe. And if you need to leave us at any moment to seek shelter, please do that because we want to just make sure that you are okay and safe. And Leah,
I'm with you. Good. I used to it.
Good. Okay, I gotcha. And Leah, we talk about obviously these serious situations happening globally, and from war to politics to the climate crisis. There are just so many fights out there that social media is helping with.
Absolutely. And for your question earlier about if I utilize news sources for the content that I create, I do. And that's really important for me because a lot of Gen Zers are actually getting their climate information from TikTok. So a lot of Gen Zers are turning to TikTok and Instagram before they will read a traditional news publication. And as someone with a scientific background, I really want to make sure that the folks on TikTok and using social media are not being persuaded by disinformation because there's so much climate disinformation, especially on TikTok. So sometimes in my videos, I'll try to use as accessible information as possible because you can say the same thing in so many different kinds of ways. And even though I'm well versed in environmental science and policy, the most important thing is making sure people are able to understand this information as accessibly as possible. And in some ways, kind of partnering with traditional media by sharing some of their news stories that Gen Zers maybe wouldn't have seen on their own. But if I can flash it in the back of a TikTok video or something like that, hoping that they take the extra step to read the full article. But if they don't, trying my best to summarize it with some sort of journalistic integrity. So yeah, that's why it's really important. And Gen Zers are just receiving news in really unique ways right now.
And Annie, is that how you operated, knowing that Gen Z is taking and consuming news in this way?
Yeah, I think for our campaign, so much of it was about meeting people where they were at, whether that was throughout different counties in, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but also understanding online. And, so much of politics has traditionally been through things like TV ads. And while that, I think, and traditional media is still very important, we also had to adapt to understanding there's a lot of new areas, including social media, of where people are getting their information, where people are communicating, how people are engaging. And so that was across platforms. That was using Twitter, that was using Instagram, that was using TikTok, and that was using Facebook and all of these different demographics. And I think it was also catering the type of content and not just copying and pasting, using the same messaging, not changing policy stances or not changing things, again, from an authenticity standpoint, but understanding that how people are going to want to view content, what's going to work on the algorithm, how people intake the content on Twitter is different than on TikTok, is different than on Instagram, and trying to really cater that to the audience so that it can get on as many eyes as possible and do it in ways that then they will not just be seeing it, but they will be engaging in it and they will be taking something away from it. And it'll be building upon all of the other things that we're doing on the ground in traditional media, as well as using digital as a tool to do a lot of the other areas of campaigning. So being able to fundraise using social media, being able to tell people about events or show people events that they maybe couldn't make it to, or, being able to tell them policy stances or show them, news cycle, things in the news cycle that are happening that, for a lot of Gen Z, they don't subscribe to cable. And so showing what is happening and what's being talked about and what were key points for the campaign on the platforms where they're already going for information.
Shoshana, we had the previous discussion about real job or not, and I'm listening to Annie, and that sounds like a pretty real job because you had a campaign where social media had a big impact, and currently John Fetterman is a sitting United States Senator.
So I love the way she thinks about it too, because there's too many people who like social media but aren't thinking through it methodically, like how to reach the right people. It's very different for me than I think pretty much anyone else here, because I try to reach the influencers. Like, I'm glad when I reach other people, but my organization, the R Street Institute, we're all about bite-sized bits of policy that can change stuff. So, and it's not always sexy. It's flood insurance reform or occupational licensing reform, but it has real effects. We also do climate policy. We do cybersecurity, and some of it gets kind of dense, and I have to figure out ways to make it open to people. So I'm not on TikTok, and I think that makes me a big rarity here. I also, no offense to anyone, I kind of think it's a security risk, and I'm not easy to say this platform might be bad, but I think it might be bad. I'm usually on the other side of it. But because of that, I operate, oddly enough, a lot on LinkedIn, a lot on Twitter. Email is my biggest thing. I know that sounds ridiculous, especially as everyone else here is 5-second, 20-second videos. And I'm like, no, traditional email. But that's where the people I want to reach are. We have Hill lists, and I'm like, well, if I want this congressman to see it, I'll just message his staffer. Like, that's way easier than like running ads or like, tweeting something out. I could tag them, and sometimes I do. But it's funny because I operate both new stuff and old stuff, and it's effective. One of my favorite stories ever, and I hope I get the details right, but I think it was Alabama. They wanted we do alcohol regulation, deregulation basically. But there was in Alabama, their alcohol control board, I forget the exact name because it's different in every state. They were like, we're going to regulate margarita pitchers because what if someone gets drunk and breaks the pitcher and then like goes like, oh, I'm going to harm you with this. So I tweeted it out, and it was basically like, WTF, like, this is not an evidence-based thing. There is not an epidemic of this happening. This isn't going to solve a problem. And literally like hours later, he's like, well, this organization went out after us and we didn't even fully decide to do this. And I'm like, oh, so now you're stepping back. And that was just amazing. I also, with licensing reform, my parents are hippies, as you can tell. I have some of the remnants there. But my mom does a lot of Tai Chi and Qigong. Qigong is the ancient Chinese art of energy work. In Oklahoma, there's a pretty good state senator there who wanted to license it. How do you license the ancient Chinese art of energy work? And I tweeted it out. I had my mom and my colleague talk together. I'm like, Mom, can you just freaking explain? Like, I don't fully get it. Can you walk my colleague and me through exactly how this works? So we wrote an op-ed, and I later found out that the senator was like, why'd she go after me? My constituent. I'm like, what constituent is like, you gotta license this ancient Chinese art. So after he kind of backed down off of it, and I don't think it was going anywhere, maybe I shouldn't have, but I'm like, no, don't YOLO introduce bad regulations. And he was a Republican. I think in Alabama it's Republican. So whoever is annoying me with bad policy, I'll go after, which I like having that freedom here to do, because at past jobs I didn't always. Now I'm like, yeah, if you're doing bad policy, I can go after you. But I use the most effective means. If I'm like, I know this elected official is going to appreciate if like we get our people one-on-one, and I'll be like, listen, I have concerns. Can we talk through this? And sometimes that works. Other times it doesn't, and that's okay. And I'll be like, look, I'm not going to be with you on this. And usually they're adults and they're pretty good about it. Even Elizabeth Warren, who like I disagree with on everything, except we agreed on licensing reform. So we did that together, and like that was awesome. And I had enormous respect for her for being like, she yells at me a lot on Twitter, but who cares? Because like this is a good idea and we can come together. And that's the good stuff. And there's a lot to think through. It's going to be different for every role, every kind of influencer, even throughout politics. But I really love my job.
When did you realize you had that power to be able to tweet something and then people pull back?
Oh, I think that Alabama one a couple of years ago was a big moment. I'm like, oh my God, that was quick. And now I'm like, maybe I tweet about this bad bill because I see it moving, or like maybe I tweet about just a bad policy idea that I don't think people are really thinking through. One that's happening all over the country now is Kids Online Safety Act. And I just wanted to mention it because in the previous panel, we were talking about teens online and making sure kids are, of age. So how do you do that? Well, the big age verifiers, the companies that do that, say facial recognition. So you scan your kid's face every time they go to a website. Okay, well, surely take a step back. There must be something better. There's a bill that I was looking at in another state that's like, okay, kid has to put in birth date, name, and parent's address. And the social media platform has to maintain that information because they never get hacked. Like companies never get hacked, government never gets hacked. Everything's super secure. That's not a problem that's occurring. And I'm like, and I'm sure that there will become a way that we can verify better. And I want companies to work on it because I'm for, like, if the law says this, you should do your best to follow it. But you don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And that's a lot of what I focus on, where I'm like, I agree this is a problem. I don't know that government can solve it, which is where my free market vibes come out. But it is something I'm always thinking through. Let's not make it worse. Yeah. So it's really exciting.
Dr. Mark, I'm curious, while you were listening to Shoshana make her points there, and one, I was just thinking about TikTok. We asked that younger panel of South Carolina students, do you listen to the headlines about China and TikTok, and should it be banned, should it, not? I'm curious your thoughts on the TikTok. I said the TikTok, Lord, I will never know. And it was on tape. I said tape. Okay. we're going down a rabbit hole here. So I'm just curious about your thoughts about TikTok and the potential bans of it on government devices here in the U.S. And should it be banned?
Well, I think you just got to own the TikTok now. It's out there. It's a real thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I've done it before in class. No, I think there's two things at play here. I think tends to be a backlash or a moral panic whenever a new technology comes out. And some of that is ill-founded. But I think in an attention economy now where we live in a place where our attentions are diverted rapidly, it's okay to have that worry. But I think, there'll be something else that replaces TikTok. And we don't know what that is yet. And there'll be the same outcry and moral panic around it because it's taking teenagers, Gen Z's attention, and how should we react to that? I don't think that's necessarily valid because I think, as Leah said, and as Annie said, and Shoshana, that people are getting information from these new media sources. And as McLuhan said, the media is the message. Hi to any media students out there. And I think that's something that shouldn't be ignored. The focus should be on how do we get good information through these media if people are actually consuming them. We need to be going where people are actually looking at this. I think the China comment about security, I think there are some valid concerns, but I think we need to approach this with caution. We have to bear in mind that some of the biggest security compromises for social media companies have been American companies. Saudi moles, a jury in San Francisco found a couple of people guilty for spying for the Saudi government. And they actually got inside Twitter's headquarters because they work for Twitter and were sending private information about Saudi dissidents back to Saudi, right? So when we're talking about the security of companies, we also need to look closer to home. And I think those questions about security apply to all social media companies equally. So I don't know whether the security issue is a big one, necessarily bigger than it is with, say, Facebook or Twitter. I think the thing we should be concerned about, Matthew, and to everyone, is not necessarily what people are. The fact that these platforms exist is trying to get accountability and transparency in how these work, right? These are private companies, right? Whether it's Twitter or TikTok. TikTok's more of a challenger for in the US because it's a Chinese company. How is this data being used? And what guarantees do we have that our data is being used in legitimate or healthy ways? And I think this is something we need to be concerned about. Just to try and bring in the example of Alexander, there was a great piece about TikTok, what people in Ukraine were seeing on TikTok versus what people in Russia were seeing. And, just across the border, you had people in Russia seeing just people happy-go-lucky, living their lives, living their best lives, whereas in Ukraine, there was a war going on. So, these algorithms are curating what we see. The filter bubbles, as Annie mentioned, are restricting what we see. And I think it's important that we actually have the ability to dictate how this information, these flows are happening. Because if people control how we consume information through these algorithms, then they're restricting what we can and cannot see. And this is something that I study. I see it all the time in how people's realities are shaped by algorithms. And we have very little access to that. There's actually an algorithmic justice league that seeks to try and see how these algorithms are not so accountable. So yeah, I think there's bigger fish to fry, and we should probably not worry so much about the moral panic at the level of using, there's another social media platform that young people are using. So
Ross Mack here on the stage, is the influencer life looking through that social media lens at how people are living, how lifestyle influencers operate, is that clouding the judgment of and how we look at the potential security risk and disinformation, misinformation?
That's interesting. Is it clouding the judgment? For one, I take a step back and I say, virtually, is social media good? Does it do more good than bad? I will say yes, right? I look at social media as the ability to democratize access to information. I think it boils down to how you go about using it. Are there bad people on social media? Absolutely, right? However, does it lead to kids having, bad self-confidence, et cetera? Yes. I think, maybe that's a form of saying parents maybe monitor what your kids are doing. But I think the overall avenue of what social media is, it literally is giving voice to the voiceless, right? Dr. Jabari was talking about that on the last panel. But when you truly are looking at it and the way I'm using it, and all of us are, right? We are inspiring our followers to do different things. For me, it's saying, hey, to my audience, which is largely African American, by the year 2053, the median net worth of a black family is going to be zero. Today, it's around $12,000. So if I'm saying by each video, I'm trying to bridge the wealth gap, by each video that I'm putting out, I'm trying to help educate and inform and make people say, okay, I'm going to start investing. I'm going to start thinking about retirement. I'm going to actually get life insurance. and there's so many things that I'm passionate about. But if you have a brand where you are bringing positive change, then I think overall you got to look at it and say, whether your judgment is clouded or not, I think the overall idea is like you're doing good for society.
And you feel social media is supplementing the flaws in our education system?
Absolutely, right? I think that if you look at the average curriculum in certain schools, right, we learn a good deal. However, does it apply to natural life, right? I have a buddy who's in the NFL who literally teaches a course called Life 101. And the idea of the course is everything you need to know in order to be a true adult. How to buy a home, right? What's your credit score? How to think about what to do with your money once you get it, right? Do we necessarily need, Greek mythology? There are a lot of great lessons taught, but do I need to know an isosceles triangle, or do I need to know, what makes up my credit score? And so I think social media, once again, is democratizing access, where when I think about finance, it's an old white man's game that for the most part are secrets passed down. It's not necessarily in a textbook, right? I went to a pretty decent school, and the majority of things that I learned when it comes to building wealth was not taught in school. And so that's how I look at social media.
Yeah, I would rather have learned about financial literacy and how to, how my credit score would impact my life versus a hypotenuse or A squared plus B squared. Anyway.
I was gonna say I haven't used the quadratic formula at all, but I have had to try to figure out how to do taxes.
Yeah.
And
the one thing I did learn was this percentage thing. But anyway, so you make a great point there. And Shoshana, you hear that, and the good, the bad. I will say left, right, all of that. You probably have a number of critics from the or left side who come after you. How do you handle all of that?
Okay, there we go. Sorry. So first, everything you said, I love so much. Oh my gosh. I love entrepreneurs. I love people who make their own way in business. So I love that, everything about it so much. So just want to say that real quick. Mm-hmm. But, so yeah, when I work with Elizabeth Warren, I'll get Republicans saying, how dare you rule? And I'm like, I don't care. You don't like her. Okay. Do you want her to do more bad things, or do you want her to do more good things? And assuming you like the things I do, maybe don't complain when I work with her. And same when I've worked with people further right, like Tom Cotton. Do you want more bad things or good things? So I remind people of that. Most people are pretty respectful. I block the ones who aren't. I'm like, there's just no utility. But overall, people are really, they've been really helpful. They'll tell me when I'm wrong. I'll admit when I'm wrong. I change my views, not constantly, but if there's new information that I was wrong, our street works against non-competes. That's not something you think of as free market, but the way we see it is that they're coercive and run up against the limits of contract law. And I like contract law, but it has limits because you can't make insane contracts like you must be my best friend, sign this contract, and then if I don't feel like you're being my best friend, that's not something we could do, which is good. There have to be limits to government-enforced contracts. But every now and then it gets vicious. Usually I don't care. Usually they don't matter. Which is really nice, but it's a good spot to be able to support the things I believe in, pick the issues that matter most to me, and work with people. I've worked with Governor Polis on occupational licensing reform, and now in Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro, who's also a Democrat, is going after it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please talk to me. Let's learn about this. I have ideas to fine tune what you're doing. And then former Governor Ducey in Arizona is a really good friend. And he loves working with people. I was once in a group text with him and Polis, and it's chill. They're governors. They want to nerd together. And that's a really healthy dynamic that you don't really see at the national level. And state representatives, oh my gosh, they're the greatest. I know it's a really dorky thing to say, but they have so much opportunity to make change. And none of the people I'm mentioning here have ever been how dare you work with someone on the other side? Usually they're oh, do you think they'd want to work on this with me? And that's what adults do. That's how it works and how it should work.
I am curious, in no way am I trying to pit any of our panelists against each other, but I am curious how you would have advised the Dr. Oz campaign.
Quick answer, not on behalf of our street because we don't do political stuff. I wouldn't have.
There we go. And on to Annie. Annie, so we know that UNESCO really works to protect free speech, but hold these platforms accountable. Dr. Jones there actually, touched on that as well, holding these platforms accountable and the risks there. But what's the future, you think, here?
I mean, I don't think social media, digital in general, it's not going away. It's only going to get more and more prevalent in our lives and technology. And I think that I always describe, these digital tools, social media, as powerful. And I use that word really intentionally because I think you can use power for good and you can use power for bad. And as these become more and more prevalent in our lives, the responsibility becomes higher. And that responsibility is on the platforms, but it's also on the creators, it's also on the consumers. Like Leah was saying earlier about her content creation, she does her due diligence of looking up the information that she's sharing. And then as consumers, we also, when we consume content, have to be thinking to ourselves, is the content that I'm consuming, is it accurate? Mm-hmm. And I think, there's responsibility on consumers, there's responsibility on creators, and then there's responsibility on the platforms and them with these algorithms and what they are allowing to happen. Because I think, I was a journalism student. I support free speech, but I also think that free speech does not include harm, and that is in the real world as well. You can't go into, a building and yell fire, and there's not. You can't go in and be spewing things that could cause harm to people. And I think we are in this area that's gray because the internet, I say new, it's not, but we're navigating how those work in this digital space and when there's so many other voices. Now, I think it's great that it's democratized a way for everyone to be able to have a voice and to use their platform and to be able to talk about things they care about or share information. And it is helping us to spread information, but it also, there's misinformation, there's disinformation. And so the responsibility is just so much greater, and we have to be making sure on all levels that is checked. And, I'll say with TikTok, like we on the campaign, John Fetterman's TikTok is on the campaign side, and he cannot use that TikTok account as a senator. Senators can't have TikTok accounts on the official side. And we had a phone that we had to create content on because, as a campaign, we had proprietary information, and we did not want that accessible on the same device as some of these apps. And so I think that there are ways that, am I worried about my personal TikTok account? If my FBI agent or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think if they want to get information about me, they probably can figure it out. But I think when it comes to things like with national security, when it comes to things with elections, there needs to be oversight. There needs to be intentional looking at responsibility and holding these platforms, holding the people creating these platforms, holding the people creating these algorithms accountable, so that everyone's safe, and so that we do have, most people, I would say, don't want a bunch of disinformation, and also don't want people harmed. And I think that comes down to responsibility on a lot of different levels.
Alexander, there in Ukraine, in these final minutes, I just want to go back to you for a second because, again, we're thinking about you, and we really appreciate your time and, joining us here. It's not hyperbole to say that social media for you in Ukraine, it could be life or death. With the warnings that are sent out, with the information that is shared with the military, social media is literally life or death.
Can you paraphrase, please? Because I'm not sure that I understood the translation. Can you paraphrase the question, please?
No, I was saying that how important it is for you and social media in Ukraine, it could really be life or death. Whether we talk about the pros, the cons, the positives, the negatives.
Okay, I got it. For us, it's the first necessity right now. I will explain because a lot of things happens, and not always national media are quick enough to communicate this to the people. And another thing is that a lot of things happens locally. So it's not the fact even that media will be able to get this fast information from the point of event, and that is why people need so much right now. This not even like media; it is like digital media / communities. Because through these channels we've got the most relevant information. For example, right now, yes, I'm having information just from particular district from Kyiv, like what is with the light, what happening, is it safe now, what kind of alarm is it? Because now we even can distinguish. Because, for example, if it is the flights from Belarus, then we understand that it is training, and it's quite safe to be where you are and go to the basement. But when it is flight from it is the airplane from the Russia, then we understand. Oh, great! We understand that. We should go to the basement, because it is not safe. And that is very quick signals that people make. And even people from Russia, even people from Belarus, actually, who support Ukraine, help to transfer this information. Of course, it is checked and then it is published, but it is like the first necessity right now for us, because it is about quick reaction. And, in terms of war, it's better to go to the basement one bit more, than suffer. That is why, that is why it's crucial right now.
It is definitely crucial. Alexandra, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. We just learned so much. And again, we're thinking about you. To this whole panel, we could go on and on and on, but we are running out of time. Just want to say thank you all for being here and sharing your time and insights. This event has been produced as a lead up to a forum later this month in Paris. UNESCO wants to develop a framework for regulating digital platforms while protecting free speech. Joining us now from Paris is Guilherme Canella, Chief of UNESCO's Freedom of Expression and Safety of Journalists section. It's good to see you, friend.
Hi, Kenneth. I would have preferred to be with you physically present in South Carolina, as we did last time I was there, although our football team lost that game. But I hope the next time I can bring more luck to the football team of the South Carolina University. But look, this is fantastic. I've been following and my team the conversation during these last hours. And when I joined the meeting, you were talking about education and what are the different views and the different angles and how things are changing. And I saw in a previous panel this discussion on all the different inputs that the internet and the internet freedom actually is bringing, can continue bringing to protect and promote human rights, not only freedom of expression, but more than that, but also the risks for that. So this is not an easy issue at all. I would risk to say that together with other global challenges, like it is the climate change challenge, the challenge to protect the environment in a wider way, or the huge masses of migration, this issue that you discussed this afternoon, and the issue that we are going to discuss later this month about how to discuss and address these problems while protecting freedom of expression, is one of the most important challenges for the next 10 years. So the inputs that you all offered during these three hours, and that we are going to consider for the discussions that we will have here in Paris, that we have more than 2,500 people people already enrolled for those discussions, which shows the importance of the matter. This would be fantastic for us. We will actually show part of your discussions that you have this afternoon for these people later February, so that they can see the kind of concerns and the kind of suggestions you have for that. Let me finish by saying two things. You can't see very well, but I chose today a tie with the picture of Nelson Mandela for joining you today. And Mandela was a fantastic person, no? Because he, from all the time, he understood that our biggest issue is not to agree. Our biggest issue is to disagree without violence, is to disagree without polarization, is to have a conversation, and maybe at the end we won't agree, but we will move forward, at least respecting some basic human rights principles. And this is our challenge, how we protect this environment without jeopardizing human rights, not only freedom of expression, all the human rights. It's easy to say, not easy to do, but there is one certainty. We need to do that collectively. And this means that with you, with the academics, with the young people, with the influencers, with the tech companies, with journalists like Kenneth, with the civil society organizations, and also with governments and international organizations like UNESCO. So I want to thank you so very much for these rich discussions, to thank my friends in the University of South Carolina, Dean Tom and Randy and all the others, because this will contribute a lot. And of course, Kenneth, that is always a fantastic ally of these discussions. And so enjoy your weekend, and then please do connect, because it's free and open. Even if you can't be in Paris, it will be a hybrid event to our conference in February 22nd and 23rd. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guillaume. And it was great to see you last season, because our Gamecocks football team could use all the luck they can get. So thank you. We love to see you back stateside or in Paris. So thank you again to you and to UNESCO for those words. Before we end, we would like to thank the University of South Carolina, home of the Gamecocks, and Dean Tom Reichert of the College of Information and Communications for their support. We also want to acknowledge the tireless efforts of Cape Park videographer Taylor Kearns and the team from MP Strategy. And we want to thank so many others, too numerous to name, who have contributed to pulling all this together. But I do want to name one, Randy Covington, who deserves a round of applause, our Director of Special Projects. Always producing, always in the back. And this has been a great honor for me. It's always good to come home. And again, thank you to the university and to UNESCO for having me here to moderate this great discussion over the past 3 hours. We encourage you to follow the forum later this month in Paris as UNESCO tries to make sure digital platforms realize their potential as a public good. I'm Kenneth Moten. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thank you.